Good morning, members, and welcome to this meeting of the Economy and Resources Committee. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded, and the recording will be made available on the Council website for public listening. Could I remind members to follow the good practice guidance, which includes muting microphones and switching off their video when they are not addressing the meeting. Should any member wish to contribute to any item, you should write "Speak" in the Teams chat function, and you will be invited to speak in order about new issues. Should your question or issue be raised by a previous speaker, please withdraw your request so that we deal with business as efficiently as possible. The usual standing orders apply, including that any votes will be undertaken by roll call. If any member has to leave the meeting for any reason, can I remind you to either leave the Teams meeting for that period of time, or alternatively write "Leave" in the Teams chat function and then join if you are able to rejoin us, as this will allow us to monitor member attendance. We have several important items to consider today, and I anticipate we'll deal with the business in our usual efficient manner. However, before we proceed, I wanted to take time to recognise the achievements of our employability and skills team, who were awarded Best Work Ready Project from DG Chamber at their recent awards ceremony. Well done everybody involved, and I'm sure that all members will join me in offering the team our congratulations. Moving on to the agenda, item 1, Sidran apologies and Chair's approval of members' remote participation. Claire, can you provide the Sidran indicating who is participating remotely and also any apologies, please?
Okay, thank you, Chair. We have one apology today from Councillor McComb. For the benefit of members on Teams, we have 5 members in the hall. Councillor Johnston, Councillor Nicholson, Sloan and Thompson. Number of members on Teams being the Vice Chair, Councillor Brodie, Councillor Campbell, Crothers, Fairbairn, Justy, Hagman, Hislop, Ingalls, Marshall, Martin, Murray, Tate, and 2 councillors currently not present, being Councillor McClelland and Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Claire. I approve of members' remote participation in the meeting. Item 2 is declarations of interest. Do any members have a declaration of interest they wish to make, please?
Yeah. I declare an interest in item 13. I'm a member of Ann Harbour Action Group, but it shouldn't prevent me from taking part in the discussions. I'm also going directly to a funeral now, but I should return hopefully in time for this item. But we'll see. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard. I'm naturally sorry to hear that, and we'll note your declaration of interest. If there are no other declarations of interest, thank you. Then we'll move on to item 3, which is the minute of the previous meeting of 15th September. That is here for approval. Can we agree that minute, please? I will take it that we can. Thank you, members. Moving on to item 4. Item 4 is a climate emergency declaration, Dumfries Galloway regional baseline figures, and also carbon literacy report by Director of Economy and Resources. This report presents us with region-wide baseline figures and is part of the progress we wish to make on our climate emergency 12-point plan. The information presents us with an insight into current emissions data, which would form the basis of our assessment of progress on measures to make reductions and mitigation in future. We're also updated on recent work to secure an award as a carbon literate organisation, and furthermore the opportunity for elected members and officers to participate in this accredited training. Members of the cross-party working group on the climate emergency will, I am sure, wish to make comment on all aspects of the report, and I guess also on progress from their perspectives. Simon Fieldhouse and Sarah Farrell should be present to assist if members have any questions. Simon, Sarah, is there anything that you would like to add to the report before we go to questions?
Aye, thank you, Chair. It's just two small bits of just being pointed out to me this morning that in the recommendation section, Chair, under 2.4, it should read paragraph 3.29 rather than paragraph 3.19. and in 2.5 it should read paragraph 3.30 rather than 3.23. My apologies for those errors, Chair.
Thank you, Simon. We'll make those changes when we get to the recommendations. With that, I'll open up to members' comments and questions. Archie?
Thanks very much, Chair. I mean, what I am pleased to see is we now have a baseline for Dumfries and Galloway, albeit, it's a baseline which it's not an exact science, but it's important for us to move forward in that, and it's also important to see where the council sits within that, and 0.7% of the carbon emissions is accounted for. That's not to say that we sit on laurels and not do anything. And we are. I think importantly, of course, is the land use emissions, and obviously I'm sure Dougie will sort of comment on that side of things. But I think another important thing is the actual carbon literacy training, which I attended. It was over 4 days, 2.5 hours, and we are discussing with the carbon literacy training provider if we can probably do it over 2 half-days rather than the 4 2.5 days, or whatever members would prefer to actually see. So I think it's a good report, Chair. It gives us a baseline to actually work on. It shows how important our renewable energy generation is for the whole of Scotland, and it's just to commend the report, Chair.
Thank you very much, Archie. I think all very helpful comments. Dougie, can I come to you next, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I would endorse what Archie has said in terms of the significance of this particular report. The baseline, in effect, is our starting point towards 2025. I'd just like to thank Sarah and Simon for the work that they've been doing in providing or to pulling this particular report together. In terms of the emissions as they're broken down, clearly agriculture is a significant aspect of our overall emissions. But what I'm really pleased about is that there have been a number of meetings with the NFU, Dumfries and Galloway representatives, and I know that they're very enthusiastic to work with the council. So that's a very positive point to note. But moving forward, the partnerships that we develop as a council are going to be really important in terms of reaching carbon neutrality by 2025. And obviously the next stage now is going to be the production of our strategic action plan, and that's when the work will really begin in terms of identifying projects and working in close partnership with other sectors to progress us towards 2025. Thanks, Chair.
Dougie, thanks very much for the comments. I think that is really important. We're setting out a baseline. We're not apportioning blame. We want to be working with partners across the region, and I'm certainly particularly keen that we work with NFUS on this agenda. I think it's really important that we approach this in that frame of mind. I'll bring in Malcolm Johnson next.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate your remarks there as well, very much in keeping with my own thoughts. I was a bit concerned when you see land use and agriculture, given it's so important to our economy, with it says in 3.18, 12,000 jobs. I was concerned perhaps that it's something that could end up getting scapegoated, and I think because it's so crucial to our region, we need to work together, and I think working together with all organisations is the only way we're going to deal with this. But again, there are some mitigations, and I was curious to see if we could even get some estimates. It mentions agriculture. There's a lot of farms use. They have wind turbines of their own. They have anaerobic digesters, all kind of stuff. I was just curious to see what mitigation factors that could come in, because I think it's measured at a national level. And equally, I was really quite encouraged to see the amount of renewable energy generated in the region. And I think, as someone who in the past, I have to say I was sceptical about wind turbines, especially when I got surrounded by them. And you know what? As time goes on, you get used to it. And
is the volume full up in this equipment?
Can we check the volume levels? No,
We
it's
can hear them
not your
online,
fault.
no
We need folk
problem.
to be able to hear. Just pause for a second while we check the volume levels in the chamber. Just hold the point for a minute.
Certainly okay online, Chair.
No, it's my hearing aids. Just carry on.
Okay, we'll give that a try. We getting any improvement? Okay, Malcolm, you want to carry on?
yeah, it was just really to get some kind of potential. I understand what we're trying to do here is establish a baseline, and as long as the baseline's set, that's fine. But I'm definitely curious to find out what form of mitigation of the emissions from agriculture come from their own energy generation, and also curious to find out what mitigation for the region in total is derived from the renewable energy generation.
Thanks, Malcolm. Simon, can you help us in terms of mitigation measures, etc.?
Aye, thank you, Chair, through yourself. I think that's, I mean, it's a very interesting point that obviously Malcolm's raised in relation, obviously, to the mitigation and how figures are accounted for at present. It's one of the issues that we are going to have to look at in more detail moving forward. As it's kind of been identified, obviously, where we have renewable energy sort of generated, it tends to be counted at a national level rather than at a local level. And that's the same, obviously, for agricultural sort of installations of renewables through wind farms that actually contribute straight to the grid. So there is more work required to actually drill down into those figures so we can find out exactly what we're generating at a local level. There are obviously more work that we need to do to obviously sort of progress that, and it's something obviously as kind of been identified. This is a starting point in terms of the baseline, and hopefully these figures will just get more and more detailed as we move forward over the course of the climate emergency, Chair. So in short, I don't have a definitive answer for Councillor Johnston, although we will obviously take that into consideration and look at how we can obviously sort of work with our partners to try and get.
Thanks very much, Simon. Yeah, I think it will be helpful for us to be able to get into the region-specific detail of that as we continue to develop this in the future. I'll bring in Ivor Hislop next.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's a good starting point that we've got. However, because you're looking at, I would say, skewed figures, land use to me is forestry and grassland as a former farmer. So therefore, if you actually look at that in with the land use, it's not such a standout position because they're actually helping the situation with the balancing it up. However, the one thing I'm sort of slightly ashamed of is I was the one who asked if members could do the carbon literacy training, and unfortunately owing to work commitments I couldn't get along to it. So if there is another chance to get on, I'm looking forward to that. And I must admit, it was the survey that we had to do prior to going to it. I was quite amazed that I'm actually carbon negative, I think it said. It was down to the fact that some of the questions that I had to answer were things like, how often do you shop for clothes? Well, I could just about say not very often, because it's usually the wife that does it for me, and I don't know if that counts. So if you answer the questions correctly, you might not be given the proper answers, because it might be how often do you receive clothes, which might put a different limit on the figures that come forward. But I think it's a good start, and I would like to do the carbon training because I think that'll help me a bit. I'm maybe a bit of one of the naysayers. I believe that there is a point in the world where temperature does rise, and then there'll be other times in the world's cycle where you actually see more cooler temperatures. I think that's been seen in the past, but I think there is a part where there is more consumption is causing the problem as well, and that's something that we need to address. So I think any training for that would be helpful to me.
Thanks, Ivor. Yes, I mean, I'd welcome the training. Perhaps we can join in together, by all means. This report absolutely does not say, and I don't think this council wishes to say, that agriculture is a problem. I think that's really important. We're reflecting the figures that we've found so far. I do take the point that clearly land use will also provide mitigation measures as well, and quite clearly some of those will be the very same people. So we need to look, I think, very much in line with Malcolm Johnson's point, at what we do to mitigate emissions. And agriculture will have, I think, a significant role to play in that. I'll bring in the leader next, Elaine.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, one of the things I wanted to bring up was actually the carbon uptake by grass, because that would reduce the land use emissions by about 300. Admittedly, it would still be the biggest factor. But the other point I wanted to raise is that at the last meeting we approved the Dairy Nexus project, which has gone to Borderlands and been approved by the Borderlands Partnership. And one of the focuses of that was the reduction in carbon emissions from the dairy industry, and also the better use of products and byproducts of the industry. So in approving that, and hopefully in the development of that project, we will, or the region will be contributing to the reduction in the emissions from land use. So I think, that there are very positive developments in the future, which will help to bring these figures down, or possibly increase the figures on the emissions and sinks diagram on the following page. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Elaine. I think it's an important point that there are things in planning that should make a big difference to this. I'll bring in Stephen Thompson next.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it's maybe just to follow on the back of Councillor Johnson's points just about the mitigation. In 3.7 and 3.9 in the report, it does touch on some of the assumptions that have been made, and I think obviously we've sort of agreed this is a good starting point, and I think we needed that kind of baseline data, but I think, I don't know if in the recommendations we need to maybe strengthen the sort of need to constantly refine and maybe challenge some of the assumptions, because while we may only have access to sort of national data, clearly dealing with a climate emergency, we have a role to play as a local authority, but equally it's within context of national and obviously global climate. Climate knows no regional boundaries, so I think we have to understand where we sit in the context of that, both nationally and beyond. So I think the more detail we can actually get on our local figures, the better, because we'll not only understand how well we're doing measured against ourselves for our net zero targets, but also how well we're doing contributing to the national targets. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. I'll go to Ian Carruthers next, please.
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Thompson just covered it there, really, but I would ask that just when will we actually see that information? It'll come back in reports at some point. I think in order to understand how we're doing it as a region across the other, compared to the other 31 local authorities in Scotland, I'd like to understand where we sit in that picture.
Simon, can you help with that, please?
Thank you, Chair, through yourself. Obviously we are leading the way at this moment in time in terms of sort of defining our baseline for Scottish local authorities. It is something, obviously, that we have got links into sort of nationwide groups, so we can obviously try and get that detail pulled together to look at how we are sitting in terms of our benchmarking across other local authorities. I'm not too sure on timelines. That's something I'd need to go back and have a little look at, and obviously let members know when we've actually got that detail to hand. In terms of follow-up reports, obviously we were anticipating that we would look at our carbon emission figures probably sort of every 2 years, Chair, just due to obviously the volume of work involved in pulling the figures together, and obviously look at bringing those back to committees to ensure that obviously there was a progress made against obviously the ambitions made within the Climate Emergency Declaration.
Okay, thanks very much, Simon. I think that's helpful. Doogie, can I come back to you? I think you'd indicated you want to come back in.
Yeah, thanks for letting me back in, Chair. Just a couple of points. In terms of the farming sector, I think we have to see this very much as an opportunity and not a threat. And as I said previously, that the enthusiasm from NFU Scotland is really, really encouraging. And it's that whole piece around working in partnership. The second point I'd like to make, and following on from Ivor and Archie's comments on carbon literacy training, it still grates me a little that a certain councillor referred to me once during committee as being back on my bandwagon. And I think the important thing is that as councillors, we all need to have a good level of understanding of climate change. So I would really encourage elected members to come forward and undergo the training. As we can see from the agenda in today's committee, action on climate change is permeating all through everything we do as a council. And, you know, we've got a very much increased awareness of climate change in our communities across the region. So I think it's really important that as elected members, that we, you know, have a very good understanding, both in terms of what we are doing as a council, but also how that relates to what's going on across the region, whether it's in farming and transport and housing, you name it, it cuts right across everything. So I would really encourage as many of our elected members as possible to put themselves forward for the carbon literacy training. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Dougie. So I'm quite happy to volunteer, so it's on the public record. Ian, do you want to come back in, Ian Trellers?
Please, thanks, Chairman. Just on the back of the answer from Simon, I just think it's important. I think 2 years is too long. We need that more detailed information sooner than that if we can possibly get it. And I'm thinking of potential policy changes that the council might want to consider and actually make changes to. It might be in a local development plan where we can actively encourage the farming community or the agricultural community to be more pro renewable energy source production, so generation. So I think that level of detailed information at Dumfries and Galloway regional level, we need to be more proactive in getting that level of information, and we can then filter that back into our policies. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Ian. So, Simon, looking at 2.2, it refers to the necessity of the council to undertake further annual assessments. So, what's the distinction between, I guess, an annual assessment and a refresh of the whole baseline study piece? Can you take us through that?
Thank you, Chair. I think sort of when I was pulling the recommendations together, Chair, we're thinking obviously that we are required, obviously, by the council's sort of obligation to pull together an annual assessment, which is obviously, I believe, the next committee item in terms of our climate duties reporting to the Scottish Government. That would continue on an annual basis, but to do a region-wide roundup, we would be looking, obviously, at trying to do that in with a bit more time, just given, obviously, sort of the work required. However, I'm happy to take direction from members, and obviously, if they feel that, obviously, 2 years is too long, then we can please see if we can roll that into an annual report.
Okay, I'll bring in Archie next. Archie?
Yes, thanks, Chair. And obviously, we haven't been sitting on our laurels thinking about how we're going to take this forward. Just as early as last Friday, I raised it with the Housing Forum in my role as Chair, and I actually got a presentation from Sarah to the Register Social Landlords and Housing Associations and private developers as well. So it's not sitting back at the moment actually doing this. And I think, you know, from the perspective of the working group, there are things that are ongoing at the moment, but it's getting that information back from our partners. And we don't want to be pushing them. We want to be encouraging them. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And when you look at the table in table 3, it is all about influencing others and try to reduce, you know, the impact in Dumfries and Galloway, because although we can do a bit more, we are doing what we can as a council, and we're looking to do more as a council, but it's going to be influencing and encouraging other people to do that side of things. So it's right that, you know, we do have the next item, which is the annual report, but also looking at where we can actually go from here. Now, 2025 isn't that far away. And it's a very, very hard target to hit. and we as a council should be doing what we can and influencing our partners in doing that. But it's all about making sure those partners understand where we are coming from. We need to understand where they are coming from and how can we support each other going forward. That's what I'd say in that, Chair.
Thanks, Archie. I welcome members' enthusiasm for this, actually. And if we are of a mind that annual is the right way forward, and I haven't heard from Simon that cannot be done, recognising that Archie quite rightly says 2025 will be here before we know it, that might be the most sensible way forward, if folk are content with that. I'm not seeing any further members indicating just at the moment. Oh, sorry, Stephen, I had missed you out. Carry on, Stephen.
Yeah, apologies, Chair. I was tempted to use the MS Teams, but I thought I'll just wave at you and attract your attention that way. Yeah, I think just to augment what Councillor Driver is saying, I think the point I was trying to make with 3.7, 3.9 was that here are national UK and Scotland agencies, if you like, as opposed to regional partners. So while I'm conscious that it might be difficult to get data from certain sectors within our region, I think there's almost like a leadership role that we at the forefront of actually, taking the climate challenge forward, showing that leadership and maybe lobbying or inputting at a national level, saying, can you just disaggregate your figures so that each region knows what their livestock outputs are, what their contribution towards renewable energy is? Because I think that's a fair question to ask, especially given that it's governments that are taking a lead on this some of the time as well. So I think that would be reasonable to push for. Whether or not we actually get the data back as soon as we'd like is another matter, but I think it certainly shows leadership, and I think we've demonstrated that already with this report.
I think it's a very good point. Actually, Stephen, I agree with that. We'll be better able to make good decisions if we have more data that reflects what actually happens in the region. So I'm certainly happy that we look at that. I think it makes sense. Simon, you want to come in there, and then we'll go to the recommendations.
Aye, thank you, Chair. It's just to go back to Councillor Thompson's point. I think obviously sort of what we're looking at is obviously further engagement with organisations like the NFUS, SRUC, and SAC. Sort of locally, we have meetings sort of pre-planned before Christmas to obviously look at how we can work with them and obviously try and disaggregate and look at best practice that may be being implemented across the region to reduce our emissions further. So I think sort of I take on board the points that are made, and hopefully sort of through those actions we're trying to discharge those already, Chair.
Okay, noted. Thank you, Tommy. I'm sorry it's been a problem for you, Tommy. Okay, thanks. Okay, Archie, you wanted to come in there, please?
It's okay, Chair. Press the wrong button.
Not to worry. Okay, with that, we'll go to the recommendations. Also noting that I think Stephen perhaps wanted to make a suggestion when we get to the appropriate part, but we'll take them one at a time. So at 2.1, are we content to note the activity and the Commission undertaken to secure the Council and regional carbon baseline data as detailed at paragraph 3.4? Okay. And at 2.2, are we then happy to note the methodology and assumptions made to support the calculation of the current baseline and the necessity for the Council to undertake further annual assessments to assist with monitoring activity and impacts across the region? That's as detailed at paragraph 3.6. Stephen?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think this is where, at least having heard what we've heard today and the sort of enthusiasm from members, I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, but if we can somehow maybe strengthen or get that assurance that maybe a commitment maybe to bring back annually, whether or not it's this form of reporting or even greater detail in terms of the work on the assumptions, because I think we've acknowledged that this is the best we can do just now. It sets a baseline, but there's clearly work to do to actually get a more granular understanding of those figures and maybe get more detailed information back from the various partners and sources. So I don't know how we would maybe best capture that, but it's maybe just to, rather than note something, maybe agree to get that back.
So if we added and agree this committee receives annual progress reports, would that seem fair? Archie, you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's obviously one of the partners working with Dumfries Galloway College as well, and they are looking at how we can improve the understanding of where we are within Dumfries Galloway, and they've got a piece of work doing. So I would imagine by the time this comes back to us in a year's time, that information will be there.
Thanks, Archie. I think that's helpful. So if we're content then, 2.2, but with the addition that we agree that this committee receives annual progress reports. I think everyone is content with that. I'll pause to check. Okay. At 2.3, we're asked to agree the baseline figure presented in Table 5 for inclusion within the strategic plan to be presented to this committee in January for adoption. Are we content to agree that? 2.4, note. Actually, can we say note and welcome the Bronze Carbon Literacy Award achieved by the Council, as detailed in paragraph 3.29? Corrected as Simon had outlined at the beginning of the meeting. Members content with that? Okay, and at 2.5, agree that other elected members and senior council officers should be able to actively participate in the existing climate literacy training scheme to gain a better understanding and awareness of carbon literacy as detailed in paragraph 3.30. We content with that? Stephen?
Yeah, it's a bit frivolous, Chair, but I think we should also record that you did actually volunteer as well.
And I volunteered, and Councillor Hislop also volunteered. And I think it's important that that is also reflected. Although I don't think we need that in the recommendation. It is on the public record, let's face it. Okay, members, thank you very much for that. I think it's been a good debate on an important item and a good starting point. Simon, thanks for your time. Sarah, much appreciated. Members, we'll move on to item 5, which is the Climate Change Duties Report 2019-20, report by Director of Economy and Resources. The committee is presented with the mandatory climate change duties report, which is due to be submitted to the Scottish Government by the end of November and is here for our consideration and approval. I welcome the progress highlighted in the report and the detailed information contained within the statutory report, which is included as an appendix. This has been helpful in supporting the work we've just been discussing and establishing the baseline for our region, and indicates both the activity and agreed work on addressing the climate change emergency within the Council itself. Paul McCulloch is here to assist if members have any questions. Paul, is there anything that you would like to add?
Thank you, Chair. Nothing to add to the report. Happy to take questions. I've got myself, Simon and Sarah should questions arise. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks very much, Paul. Thank you, Simon and Sarah, for staying on for this one. I'll bring Elaine in first, please.
Thanks, Chair. It's actually just a very minor point, but in the statutory report on page 44, there's a description of the structure of the council, which seems a bit out of date as it refers to the 4 departments, and the council's actually been restructured since then. I suspect it's probably a cut and paste from a previous report, possibly, or a previous statutory report, but it's just that it's not up to date with the current position with regard to the council structure. Thanks.
Thanks, Elaine. Paul, I take it we can just make that factual amendment.
Yeah, Chair, we'll get that done. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Paul. Katie, you're next, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm looking at the appendix on item 5, and one of the issues that I often bring up is biodiversity. Now, we've just talked in the previous item about the need to gather information, about gathering the data, education, etc. And I'm just wondering, looking on page 47 under adaptation, it makes reference to the D&G Local Biodiversity Action Plan, which is available through SWISIC, but it was last updated in 2009, and I'm wondering if this is going to be updated at any point. I our biodiversity is referenced at certain points, and certainly when we were looking at our local development plan, biodiversity was one of the issues that government wanted to ensure was embedded in our plan. And again, throughout the appendices, it is mentioned. So, you know, we have got on page 62, it makes reference to this plan again. And then also within our local development plan, it makes reference to the Scottish biodiversity strategy, but there's no link to what that strategy is. It does make reference that the local authority has not been assigned responsibility to deliver this policy, but I think it would be useful to tie this in. And just on the sort of final point of education, it makes reference to SWISIC, which is the South West Scotland Environmental Information Centre. Now, as a member of Southern Upland Partnership, I'm aware of this organisation, but I'm just wondering how are we as a local authority feeding into this and supporting this organisation that appears to be holding this work on behalf of the council?
Thanks, Katie. Paul, can you assist with that? And potentially Simon as well, please.
Thank you, Chair. With regards to the first point regarding biodiversity and action plan, yeah, I'm sure we can get in touch with our colleagues across the council to have that reviewed and updated. With regards to the Scottish biodiversity strategy, yes, we'll ensure that the links are included within that. Regarding the SWISIC question, Simon, can I pass that one over to you?
Thank you, Paul. Through yourself, Chair. Yeah, I mean, SWISIC are obviously sort of were the old Environmental Record Centre for the south of Scotland, and we work very closely with them. Following the departure through the ERVS scheme of the Council's Biodiversity Officer, we actually have a service level agreement set up with SWISIC to obviously support and assist and ensure that information flows in both directions so they can help with planning applications, and we can obviously sort of provide further information along the lines of biodiversity and the projects that we're doing and delivering as the Council. Just going back onto one of the points you raised regarding the LBAP, at this moment in time, there are no plans for us to review the Biodiversity Action Plan in the forthcoming 12 months. We are looking at how we may facilitate that in the future, depending on strategies that come out from the Scottish Government. But we will be bringing a report back, I believe, in January regarding obviously sort of some annual reporting that needs to be required as part of the duties that we have under biodiversity to identify obviously what's been undertaken at a local level. Councillor Hagman, hopefully that helps.
Thank you, Simon. Malcolm, you're next, please.
Thank you, Chair. On the face of it, there's some quite encouraging news in this. On page 34 of the table shows quite a substantial improvement in our position, with a lot of very, very good measures having been taken, like LED lighting, LED street lighting. I'm particularly keen on the strategic housing investment plan and bringing brownfield sites back into use and town centre living, and the knock-on effects that will have on our carbon emissions going forward. So there's a lot of good news in this report, but just to, in a similar vein to what Elaine raised about the actual report, there's bits of it do look as if they are a bit cut and paste. Page 41, for example, still referring to something I think we were all trying to forget, the trunk roads maintenance contract, and things like that. So I think perhaps some detailed checks needing done on that report before you sign it, Chair, and send it off.
Thank you, Malcolm. I think we'll ensure that the detail is indeed double-checked, as you would assume I would certainly want to before I append my signature to it. I think that's a fair point. And I guess there will be no difficulty with factual corrections post-committee. I think everyone is content with that. I'll pause to see if there are any further contributions. Archie, do you want to come in there?
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. I'm just looking at 3.15, the Council's progress towards mitigation includes, and it's the third bullet point down. The Council is currently working with colleagues from Salix. Now, I know that Salix are a finance company who are getting government funding to organise public sector projects for energy and reducing carbon emissions. They're also a partner of APSI. I'm just wondering if there is, because we are actually members of APSI, are we getting some benefit from that?
Thanks. Paul, do you want to come in on that point, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So the way Selkirk operates obviously is across public sector. So the Selkirk funding that's available is open to various public sector organisations. My understanding is that funding is offered on a sort of same basis across the piece. So I'm not aware of any preferential sort of issues that APSI would offer, but I'll certainly look into the sort of APSI side of things and see whether or not there is any opportunity there.
Thanks, Paul. Archie, do you want to come back?
No, that's fine, Chair. I think it's important that we, if we can get funding, which is a very low rate, or even at cost zero, then we should be looking further into some further projects, especially with PV. But that's my personal opinion, of course.
Thanks, Archie. Dougie?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm just looking at 3.15 and the second bullet point in relation to the reduction of the council's estate by 14 sites and in reference there to community asset transfers. A lot of the buildings that we end up putting through CAT are generally, they're old buildings, they cost an absolute fortune to heat and are poorly insulated. And to a certain degree, what we're doing is we're transferring the problem onto another group or organisation. And I can think of a couple of buildings in one ward where that's a case in point. Is there anything that we can do as a council, or is there anything being done as part of the CAP process to support organisations that take over former council buildings to actually make them and adapt them to, in terms of reducing emissions, better insulation and heating systems, etc. Because as it stands, all we're doing is we're pushing the problem somewhere else. Although it looks good for us as a council in terms of reducing the council estate, the buildings don't go anywhere; they still exist. So I'm not sure if Paul can answer this question, but is there a way in which we can support community organisations to make the buildings more climate proof?
Thanks, Dougie. Paul?
Thank you, Chair. So to answer that question, I think one of the benefits of the community asset transfer process is that community groups and organisations can tap into resources and grant funding that the council can't. So certainly from a move from council ownership to community asset transfer, that there is perhaps opportunities there for the groups occupying to tap into resource. So that's something we can look at in terms of taking forward the community asset transfer and supporting the groups to look at what grants and finances are available to allow them to upgrade the facilities themselves, yeah?
Thanks, Paul. I think that's helpful. Dougie, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, can I just ask, Paul, I mean, when it comes to community asset transfers, we'll look at the business case that the organisation brings forward. Would it be possible to sort of build into that business case a direct assessment of the issues that I'm raising in terms of the efficiency, in terms of heating and fuel bills, insulation, etc., just to as a way of actually supporting those organisations to help them think about what they can do to improve the overall condition of the building?
Thanks, Dougie. Paul, maybe that's something we can take away and look at?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll take that away, Chair, and look at how we can support the organisations. We certainly have the data available regarding the building's performance, so that'd be a good move.
Thanks, Paul. Archie, you wanted to come back in?
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair, for letting us back in. And I think Paul is right in what he's trying to say. But I think we're doing quite a lot anyway, because we have, as the community asset transfer moves forward, we have the ward officers sort of supporting those community groups to take forward and actually apply for funding. I think Dougie makes a good point. Is it actually part of the discussion going forward? But that would be a a decision for communities, I think, more than else, but we can influence that, I'm sure. So perhaps we could have a discussion with the Communities Directorate and say, you know, here's perhaps a way that we can improve on our climate emergency plan if your guys are willing to discuss with the organisations that wish to take on the CAT transfers, different funding routes to support your insulation and things like that.
Yep. I think that's a helpful suggestion, Archie, much appreciated. Paul?
Happy to take that away, Chair, and we'll feed that back in through communities colleagues.
Excellent, thank you very much. Okay, if there are no further requests to speak, we'll move to the recommendations. So at 2.1, we're content to note the progress made towards delivery of the public body duties for climate change, detailed at paragraphs 313, 314 and 318. This includes a significant reduction in waste emissions, as well as a reduction in stationary and transport emissions, which in total shows a further reduction in the carbon footprint of the authority. Content to note. At 2.2, note that by installing energy-saving measures into buildings, these methods have contributed to energy savings, and that the disposal of older, less efficient buildings has also contributed to this positive impact, notwithstanding the helpful discussion I think we've had on that as well. We're content to note 2.2. And at 2.3, to approve the content of the Mandatory Climate Change Duties Report 2019-20, as set out at the appendix, and agree the declaration at 6E is to be signed by the Chair of the Economy and Resources Committee and the Director prior to submission to the Scottish Government by 30th November. And we will deal with those factual corrections before that is done. Members content to agree? Excellent, thank you very much. Thanks, Paul. Thank you, Sarah and Simon as well. We will move on to item 6, which is a Strategic Housing Investment Plan report by Head of Economy and Development. This report seeks our agreement to the annual submission of the Council's Strategic Housing Investment Plan to the Scottish Government. Our plan makes a significant contribution towards our Council priorities, and a number of the Council services, alongside our partners, contribute to its delivery. The updated SHIP, as indicated in this report, has been subject to a period of consultation with various stakeholders. Jamie Little is present, I hope, to assist with members' questions. Jamie, is there anything that you'd like to add to the report before we go to questions?
Thanks, Chair. Just one minor point to add in the appendix to the SHIP report is at 8.5, a slight amendment to the text around Station Road in Dalbeattie. For technical reasons, it's not been possible for all 16 of these homes to achieve Passive House accreditation. It's to do with the orientation of the homes. All will be built to the high energy efficiency standards, but 8 of the homes will achieve Passive House standards. I'll make that amendment prior to submission to the Scottish Government if members are content to agree the report's recommendations.
Okay, Jamie, thanks for the clarification. I have Ivor first and then Archie. Ivor?
Thank you, Chair. I think the report's very good and it shows a good selection of projects across the area. But was it the last planning committee? We are getting objections from people now saying that sites that are within here don't meet green credentials. There was the one at Heath Hall at the Gates Rubber Company, I think, where it's forcing you to use a car. Now, my view was it doesn't, because there's a cycle path, there's bus networks, and it's quite a good bus route. Have we, or are we able to include our new climate change policy within the SHIP this time, or is it something that will take 2 or 3 years to put in place? And I think I've read through here that we do look at these things. So are they the issues that have been highlighted in current planning over the last month? Are they being addressed to make sure that we have active travel options, we are doing the best we can for climate change, etc.?
Thanks, Ivor. Jamie?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, in terms of the particular objections to that site, obviously that's a brownfield site that's been heavily contaminated, and there's a number of reasons to bring it back into use. Obviously, from a connections point of view, it's also on right onto a cycle path. It's within walking distance of a number of local services, and we certainly seek to prioritise projects on this basis. A number of the projects within the Strategic Housing Investment Plan have been long-standing and are in the design phases. However, what we're seeking to do with this current review and submission to the Scottish Government is highlight the prioritisation of sites that do deliver wider environmental benefits as well as economic and wellbeing benefits.
Thanks, Jamie. Ivor, do you want to come back on that?
No, I think, when I read through it, there was mention about these things being put in place. So I'm quite happy with it. But I think there is a feeling out there from certain people that we don't look into that. But I think Jamie's answered it, that they do. Some of them are historic developments that are coming through. But it just seems to be, it's there and we are addressing it, and it'll come through more as we go through the various updates of this plan.
Thanks, Ivor. So I have Archie next, to be followed by Malcolm. Archie?
Thanks very much, Chair. Obviously, the Strategic Housing Improvement Plan is to go to Scottish Government for approval. I think it's important to understand, of course, that we support those house builders and RSLs for, social housing and things like that. I think Ivor raises a good point about the local development plan and the policies that we've actually started to look at through our climate emergency plan, and has been suggested in the previous couple of reports. We're at the start now with the baseline information that we've actually got, and we can move forward that way. Again, I have to say that the housing forum we had on Friday, again, Sarah was here making a presentation with regards to the climate emergency side of things. We also had some other presentations from NHS and the Veterans Housing Services as well. Obviously, because I'm the chair on that one, it would be wrong of me not to invite certain people along to that side of things. I think, Chair, I'm really pleased with this plan going forward. I thank Jamie for the work that he's actually done on this, and I think what Ivor raised was absolutely correct. We're at the start of that particular road, and we need to make sure our policies and procedures follow that as well.
Thanks very much, Archie. Malcolm?
Thanks, Chair. I've got just a couple of points. I was pleased to see rural housing being mentioned, because we do spend a lot of time talking about town centres and that sort of thing, and I'm pleased to see that it's given prominence in this document, which is excellent. The next thing I was going to ask about is page 99, 3.4. For the wheelchair accessible housing as a target of 8 accessible units on an annual basis. Is that enough? I know with social care, people like to stay at home. We like to facilitate that. It's good for people's physical and mental health to be able to live at home as long as they can. And I just wonder if 8's enough. I'm assuming consultation's been done with the IJB about this sort of thing, and the social work department. And the next thing that I was quite pleased about to see is 11.3, that it's a living document. I think all these things have got to be like that. We've got to be able to respond to changes as and when we need to. But it says it's going to be, Chair, you'll probably guess what I'm going to say. It's regular review. I just wondered for a definition of regular. Is that going to be annually, biannually? What's regular? When do we review this document?
Okay, thanks, Malcolm. Jamie, can you assist with those points, please?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'll pick up on the point around the review. First of all, in terms of the submission to the Scottish Government, it is required to be submitted on an annual basis. So every year I'll be presenting a report to committee seeking your agreement to that review. Obviously, we are dealing with these projects on an ongoing basis. So operationally, we meet through the development forum on a quarterly basis and continue to review the strategic housing investment plan and the projects. In terms of actual submission, though, it is on an annual basis, just to confirm to Councillor Johnston on his question there. In terms of the wheelchair homes targets, the 8 units is what's been identified through the housing needs and demand assessment as being required in this region. However, what we do with our registered social landlord partners is on the projects as they come forward, there is an element of community consultation around actual who's going to be moving into these properties, who's in the most need of homes. And often we will exceed the 8 wheelchair homes target. The IGB are very much involved in the consultation around the Strategic Housing Investment Plan. They're one of our key partners on the Development Forum, and we do work very closely with them. They've had opportunities to provide comment and are content with the target. However, while that is the target, that's the bare minimum, and we would often expect there to be significantly more wheelchair accessible homes built each year.
Okay. Malcolm, do you want to come back?
Yeah, that's. I'm pleased to hear that. It's like a lot of people of my age were spent the last few years dealing with elderly parents and things, and we understand the difficulties that come with that. So it's good to hear.
Thanks, Malcolm. Thanks, Jamie. Ian Carruthers, I'll go to you next.
Thank you, Chair. First, apologies. The declaration of interest point, I should have said that on the appendix of this report, I have got a declarable interest in regards to Erskine Church, but that's not the point I've looked to raise. So I don't know if you can answer this, Jamie, but I'll just, it's a kind of practical stroke, sustainable economic development, and a wee bit political as well. So on that particular appendix, I've done in the Arran housing market area, I've took that as a for instance. You could use others. You could use the Gretna one as well, which is an easy one to calculate. So recently the Four-Andale South Council have been lobbied in particular about a plan application that's come in from a private developer, and as part of that discussion, we've seen the level of developers' contributions, which is very high, to say the least. It's, I think, for 50 units, it's around about £200,000 or so. Going into all the detail. But so what I have noticed is on that appendix, so in the Arran housing market area, the potential build over the next 5 years for that with RSLs at this moment in time, taking consideration is a moving document, so you can go either up or down, is around 320 units in that particular area. So the developers' contributions from the RSLs for education is zero. That's a large sum of money if you do that based on, as it stands, 50 units, couple £100,000, 320 units, and the figure that would come to. We can work that out ourselves. There's a lot of money not being received here, so I don't know if this is for yourself, Jim, or not, but just the point is, I suppose this is putting pressure not only in the private sector and the developers that are coming forward, but it's putting pressure on the council as well. I just wonder what the relationship, your understanding is, that the kind of pressure this is putting on other parts of the council, and is this policy actually working? Thanks, Chair. It's maybe the wrong forum to be raising this, but I think it's appropriate that I do because the information's there.
So, Jamie, I'm not sure how much you can necessarily answer of that.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I suppose what I will do is I'll focus on the developer contributions exemption that's applied to affordable housing, and that's probably the points I can really deal with at this point. In terms of the developer contributions, it is a supplementary guidance to the local development plan, and as such is agreed by members that there are certain exemptions applied to housing developments that are achieving council priorities. So that would include affordable housing, but it does also include derelict sites, remediation of existing properties, sheltered accommodation, and things like flats above shops. From a perspective of how we work with education, they are involved in the Development Forum and the Strategic Housing Forum, and we try to make sure that where any issues are going to arise, we seek to mitigate that. Often affordable housing developments are not always providing family homes. They may be providing homes for the elderly, and there won't be an impact on the school, and that's another reason for the exemption. registered social landlords are not-for-profit organisations as well, and that's another reason or another consideration in terms of the exemption that's applied. I think that what is a point I would make is that in terms of any viability of development that comes forward, I think the planning service are more than happy to discuss any constraints that may be caused by the education contributions. As I said, we work closely with education to try and mitigate any issues. And anecdotally, in Gretna, as Councillor Crothers has mentioned, the 90 homes that have just been completed there on the Halcrow Stadium site by Cunningham Housing Association are all now occupied. And we haven't seen, or nothing has been reported to me to identify that it's caused a significant pressure on Gretna Primary. We'll continue our discussions with education and consult them as any new projects are considered. But that's some of the reasons why we recommend to members that there is an exemption on developer contributions for affordable housing.
Okay, thank you, Jamie. Dougie Campbell, please.
Apologies, Chair. I'm going to save my question for further down the agenda. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Dougie. I'll go to Henry McClelland. Henry?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, having a bit of trouble with the mute button there. Hi, Jamie. Jamie, at section 3.3, we identify 6,735 housing as the target, the supply target, from 2016 to 2029. And when you look at the appendix, which covers the period 2021 to 24-25, there's 1,971 in the current SHIP to 24-25. I'm just wondering if you could clarify how many have actually been built and developed from 16 to 2021 and what that leaves going forward between that period 25 to 29. And in particular, I'm just interested if we have sufficient capacity, and has that been clarified and identified in LDP2 to cover what's ever left as the amount between 2025 and 2029.
Thanks, Henry. Jamie, can you assist with that?
Yes, thanks, Jared. Thanks, Councillor McClelland. In terms of the homes that have been delivered in the preceding years since 2016, I don't have that information to hand. However, I can gather that. And in terms of the housing supply target for 2017 to 2029, that figure has been identified through the housing need and demand assessment. And that's the key evidence document for both the local housing strategy and the local development plan. That ensures that we do have capacity within the local development plan to deliver those homes. The 6,000 plus target that you referred to there, Councillor McClelland, relates to all tenure types. In terms of affordable homes, it's 1,765 properties we're seeking to deliver. In terms of the actual delivery, we are working very well to try and achieve that. And we've created new strategic partners in terms of Cunningham Housing Association, who have recently come into the area to begin development. And now that the Wheatley Group, in partnership with DGHP, have set out their ambitious target to deliver 1,000 new homes, the progress is certainly going well. And we are continuing to work with the Scottish Government also to ensure that the relevant funding continues to be in place over that 5-year period as well.
Thank you, Jamie. Archie, you want to come back in?
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. It's maybe a question for Jamie. But obviously we've got these other things going on in the area, borderland, South of Scotland Enterprise, etc., etc. with the potential to bring in a load of new skilled people and opportunities for build. I'm just wondering, Jamie, if you've had a discussion with regards to the borderland and the potential for it, because I mean, apparently it says something like on the Chapel Cross site, for instance, over 2,000 jobs over a certain amount of period of time. Now, do we have the housing stock available for that, or is that included in the SHIP to take forward to the Scottish Government with that potential?
Thanks, Archie. Jamie?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Obviously, in terms of the Borderlands Inclusive Growth Deal, we are engaged with officers around supporting the delivery of the aspirations of the growth deal, as our colleagues in the local development plan team, to try and ensure that we are able to provide the housing. Obviously, the main focus is on providing jobs for people who live in the region at the moment, but also we are looking to attract new people to come and live in the region. The housing need and demand assessment works on the basis that there is a calculation done that effectively looks at the economic strategy of Dumfries and Galloway, looks at the fact that we're trying to attract new people into the region, and then applies a target for housing supply. If we can deliver that, then the anticipation is that through the calculation of the homes that we need, we will be providing enough housing to support those wider aspirations. We are, as I said before, we are working very closely with our partners to make sure we can deliver it, and that will continue to be the way we work going forward. The likes of Chapel Cross, as Councillor Dryber has mentioned, there has been significant affordable housing development in Annan. We are looking to continue that approach, especially across the other regeneration priority areas for Dumfries and Galloway as well.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jamie. I think that's comprehensive and helpful. If there are no other members wishing to speak, I will move to the recommendations. So 2.1, are we content to note the resource planning assumptions allocated to this region from the Scottish Government's Affordable Housing Supply Programme? That's as set out in paragraph 3.2.1. And at 2.2, to agree to the submission of the updated Strategic Housing Investment Plan, as is set out in the appendix, to the Scottish Government prior to its deadline date in December 2020. Okay, thank you very much, members. Thank you, Jamie. We'll move on to item 7, which is LDP 2, Draft Statutory Supplementary Guidance, Non-Statutory Planning Guidance and the Development Plan Scheme, report by the Head of Economy and Development. This report seeks approval for the Draft Mineral Resources Supplementary Guidance and the Draft Annan Conservation Area Character Appraisal and Management Plan, both to be published for 6 weeks public consultation. The report also seeks approval to adopt the master plan for the housing site at Selkirk Road, Moffat, as non-statutory planning guidance. Shona McCoy is here to assist if members have any questions. Shona, is there anything that you'd like to add?
Thanks, Chair. No, nothing further to add to the report.
Thank you, Shona. So I think I have Stephen Thompson first. Stephen?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, my question actually relates to the master plan for the housing site at Selkirk Road. Obviously, this has attracted a lot of local interest, and clearly there's been a few updates made to the papers as set out in the report. This kind of follows on from the last item in a sense in relation to developer contributions, because I'm aware that our own developer contributions document sets out a clear enough formula for the likes of calculations for education and the sort of exclusions that would be considered against that. But it's not clear, even though it alludes to things like household waste obligations and the infrastructure associated with that, where it's set at like 50 units before any sort of payment would be triggered. And also community facilities like health centres, for example. And while I think our documentation for developer contributions aspires to do those things, it's not clear what the mechanism is for working out what the contributions would be. I appreciate that'll be on a case-by-case basis, but it might be helpful that we maybe look at that again in more detail. But in terms of the Moffat site, if it's broken down into phased developments, for example, as time goes on, how do we build in a way of calculating developer contributions depending on which phase of the development it is? Because you could have a phased development, each of which is maybe, say, 40 units, none of which will trigger the 50-unit threshold for waste recycling infrastructure, for example, and some of which may impact on education or not, and some of which may impact on health provision. So I'm just sort of wondering, do we take it as a totality, and how do we do it, or is it on a case-by-case basis? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Shona, can you help with that, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's probably important to bear in mind that the master plan is actually just providing the principle of development on the site, and is then just a material consideration when actual subsequent applications come in for each phase that's set out in the master plan. The overarching policy in the local plan does hopefully address those concerns raised by Councillor Thompson, in that we do say in the first sentence that developer contributions will be sought where a development proposal or a combination of developments creates an identified need. So that was added in, so that we don't get developments that come forward below certain thresholds that are set out in the supplementary guidance. I think the other thing as well to bear in mind is that the development of this site in Moffat will take place over a number of years, and the requirement for developer contributions could change over the lifetime that site is developed. Therefore, the detail of developer contributions will be dealt with when each detailed phase comes in through a planning application.
Okay, thanks very much, Shona. Stephen, you want to come back in?
Yeah, thanks, Shona. I appreciate that, and I think it was just good to hear that. But I think there is that, I suppose, perception that a cumulative development over a period of years, taken in the round, might be, well, that's naturally going to have a 200-unit impact on the local infrastructure, but each application in and of itself may not. So there's that kind of development creep, or at least the fear of that. So could you assure members, and I suppose the public who might be listening, that would be something that would be taken into account?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly will. When this master plan was prepared, you can see by the list of documents at the end, there's been quite extensive work done to try and work out at this high level across the whole of the site what the infrastructure requirements are going to be. When detailed applications come in, colleagues in development management will undertake extensive consultation with relevant consultees. It's quite difficult to provide confident reassurances that as the length of this site is developed out, but that's why we have the policies in place in the local plan to hopefully capture those eventualities. I'm not sure if that addresses your concerns or not.
Thank you. That'll do for today.
Thanks, Stephen. I'll go to Katie Hagman next. Katie?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've printed out the mineral resources supplementary guidance because we've only got the links to the papers rather than the actual copies before us, and I appreciate that these are in draft form as such and will go out for consultation. I guess my first question is, if we're issuing them 6 weeks from today, that takes us to the 5th of January, which is going to be over the Christmas and New Year period. And I'm just wondering, with many organisations maybe shutting down for the 2 weeks over Christmas and New Year, is there any way to extend that so that we can get a true representations coming into the council? But certainly in terms of the mineral resources, can I just first of all confirm, does this include things like gold? Now, my reason for asking is I'm aware of a private company who has approached the community council and ward members. I've yet to actually meet or engage with this private company at all, but certainly they are looking to scope out an area within Ward 2. Now, that area is not identified anywhere within this supplementary guidance, and therefore my question is, if it's not identified in the supplementary guidance, can that extraction be taken forward. My other concern I have is on page 4 of the supplementary guidance. I appreciate members may not have printed out or have the copy in front of them, but it gives a bullet point list of proposed new mineral workings or extensions of existing workings will be supported where the following have been addressed and to the satisfaction of the council. And in that bullet point list, there's no mention of the climate emergency, the effects of CO2 or biodiversity. Now, I appreciate some of those points are brought up within the main LDP2 guidance, but in terms of this supplementary guidance, I'm just wondering whether it would be appropriate to have our working group, our environmental group to actually look at this and to see if there's any additional bullet points that need to be put on there, just because I'm really concerned there's no environmental impact assessment as a condition of mineral extraction, and I would have thought that that would be something really quite crucial, considering we've just approved the previous 2 items relating to the climate emergency. So there's a few questions in there, Chair, so forgive me for posing them all at once.
Okay, thank you, Katie. Shona, can you assist with these? Does it cover gold?
Yeah, I'll try and hopefully I'll capture them all, Councillor Hagman. Yes, I was aware of that when I read through the committee report myself this morning, that the 6-week public consultation is the minimum that we're required to undertake. We're aware that it will fall over the Christmas New Year period, so we would naturally look to extend that to probably 8 weeks, even 10 weeks. Because although if the guidance is approved today to go out for consultation, that probably won't happen until the following week. So we make sure we avoid any holiday period. In terms of the second question regarding gold, I suppose the short answer is no, the guidance doesn't cover that, because it really looks at construction material, construction minerals. And then there's a section on the extraction of coal. That's certainly something we could look at, but I think the idea behind the guidance is that it sets the principles behind which planning applications for mineral extraction would be assessed against, which probably leads on to your final question, which is the box on page 4 is actually, it just replicates the policy that's in the adopted local plan. And I'm afraid it's not possible to actually add additional bullet points to that policy. There are a number of overarching policies that any application would also be assessed against. So that might capture that. But in terms of the detail of a minerals application, depending on the type of application, an environmental impact assessment would need to be prepared anyway to determine that actual application that comes in. The bullet points that are in policy ED13 really reflect what's in Scottish planning policy. So although that's the main policy, that's not the only policy that would be used to determine an application that came in for mineral extraction.
Okay, thanks,
If I can come back, Chair.
By all means, Katie, no problem.
Yeah, so if we can't add into the bullet points at all, can there be additional narrative put in there to ensure that any mineral extraction does, that we're not going to be damaging the environment in any way? Because this is, as members will be aware, obviously we're looking at minerals, we're not looking at peat, but there was a huge public outcry at peat extraction, and I would hate for us to agree or put out policy that is going to be conflicting with our climate emergency declaration and our commitment to carbon zero policy. Just as a sort of final question, if I may, Chair, I appreciate that mineral resources doesn't include gold. So where does gold come under? Because sure, I'm just wondering, where would the guidance be for extraction of semi-precious and gold? Where would that guidance be, Shona?
I think if an application came in, this would be one of the policies that would be used to assess that application. I think that the actual guidance focuses on the main construction aggregates and minerals that are extracted. So I suppose it's a bit like the local development plan itself, is that it doesn't seek to cover every eventuality in detail, but it provides the policy framework within there that any application would be assessed against. In terms of the point you made about adding additional text in, we can certainly look at that, so long as the text that we put in doesn't add substantive additional points to the main policy. We have to be quite careful with that, because otherwise the Scottish Government will not then allow us to adopt the supplementary guidance. But that's certainly some wording we could look at before the draft goes out for consultation, if that was acceptable to members.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay,
Thanks for that.
Thanks, Shona. I'm sure that will be acceptable to members. I'll bring in Ian Carruthers next.
Thanks, Chair. Sean, I'm looking at page 117, and it's a development plan scheme. It's talking about the impact and plan and reform. So it's telling us that our local development plan, process is going from a 5-year review to a 10-year review. It tells us also that LDP 3 will be considered as the 5-year review, then it would be expanded after that. But it does actually say that it'll be in the way forward. We want to change them sooner, but it'll be a more flexible approach in regards to that. So a lot of members are talking about how do we incorporate our 5th priority now and take consideration of that. So the climate change emergency in particular. Is there an option? I'm just looking to understand over the short term, over the next year, a couple of years, is that something we could be looking at in shorter course, or would we have to wait until after LDP 3 has been considered or consider it as part of that? Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Ian. Shona?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Hopefully, if I've understood you correctly, Councillor Carruthers, our LDP 3, we do have to prepare it within a 5-year period of adoption of LDP 2. It's just because we fell under the previous Planning Act. But LDP 3 content will very much be based on what current government guidance is, what current council priorities are. So it doesn't mean that we have to wait until LDP 4. That's certainly the work that the team will be looking to start on next year, will be our evidence gathering and taking account of council priorities and so on. One thing I think, and so I don't know if it's quite come through clearly on that, is that the 2019 Planning Act made quite a number of changes to how we prepare our local development plans. And one of them as well is the weight that the government will be giving to National Planning Framework. And in this instance, that will be NPF 4. It means going forward that NPF 4, when adopted by government, will have the same weight in the decision-making process as our local development plan. So that means that when we get round to preparing LDP 3, the policies and so on that are in NPF 4 don't need to be replicated in LDP 3. So that then, as we understand it at the moment, allows LDP 3 to focus on perhaps more community-based priorities and issues. But as I say, all that guidance is still to come out from Scottish Government. Their timescale on that has been delayed, understandably due to the pandemic. But we will certainly be fully involved and certainly bring to members any consultation documents or any significant changes that come through that process. So I think in line with a number of authorities across Scotland, it is a bit of a waiting game at the moment to see what is coming out at the national level. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question, Councillor Carruthers.
It has answered it, Shona, Chair, but I suppose the point I was getting at is some members are really keen to see the climate change and the consequence of that being added to the local development plan currently as soon as they possibly can. So it's more about, so I understand the context of NPF 4, which I'm not really a fan with to any great degree. I don't know exactly what that'll say about climate change. So I'm just thinking for a local level, if some members, which it seems to be quite a growing strength behind that, would like to see it embedded sooner rather than later, even potentially before LDP3, we can go into that process. I suppose that's where I'm coming from, Sean. I should have made myself a bit clearer. Is there an option of flexibility at this moment in time in order to do that, or will we really have to wait until LDP3 in that process?
Thanks, Ian. Shona?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Perhaps one point maybe to make members aware of that might not be is that actually in LDP2, our overarching principle of that plan is that it supports sustainable development. which includes the reduction of carbon and other greenhouse gas emissions. So the council's fifth priority is actually heavily embedded already in LDP2, but it's certainly something we can look to build on and perhaps ensure it is fully aligned with that fifth council priority in the work that we will be starting on next year to prepare LDP3.
Thanks, Shona. Thanks, Chair. That really helps. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Can I just check, Dougie Campbell, I think I saw your hand up. Did you want to come in?
No, sorry, I've done it again, sorry.
Not to worry, I'd rather check than risk leaving somebody out. Okay, if there are no further comments or questions, I'll go to the recommendations. So at 2.1, are we content to agree the draft mineral resources supplementary guidance, the draft Annan Conservation Area Character Appraisal and Management Plan, and agree to them being issued for, now the recommendations say 6 weeks public consultation, but we've received an assurance that that can be extended to avoid clashing with the festive break. Are we content to agree that as it stands, but noting that that assurance from Shona? At 2.2, to receive a report back to this committee with the outcome of the public consultation, along with any proposed changes before considering adopting the supplementary guidance. We're agreeing that. Okay. 2.3, to adopt the master plan for the development of the housing site at Selkirk Road, Moffat, as non-statutory planning guidance to Local Development Plan 2. And at 2.4, agreeing to the development plan scheme set out in the appendix and to its publication and distribution to stakeholders. Okay, I'll take it that we are agreed. Thank you, members. Thank you, Shona. We'll move on to item 8, which is a simplified planning zones pilot, Hardthorn Road, Dumfries. Report by Head of Economy and Development. In this report, we're advised of the outcomes of the public consultation on a simplified planning zone, which was agreed at our meeting in January of this year. We're being asked to approve the adoption of the scheme at Hardthorn Road, Dumfries. Shona is still with us, and I believe being joined by John Doig to assist if members have any questions or comments. Shona, John, is there anything that you'd like to add to this before we go to comments?
Not at this time, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Go to members' comments and questions. Go to Malcolm Johnson first, then Ivor Heslop. Malcolm?
Thank you, Chair. This made quite interesting reading, which is a bit unusual for me when it comes to planning things. I think this is a good step forward. The minute anybody says simplified and streamlined, that sort of thing, it always appeals to me. I thought the guidance at the back looked good, but when we were doing the previous report, it said in the new LDP plan going forward, simplified planning zones were changing to master plan consent areas. Now, is that the same thing? And if we agree this going forward, does that then become a template for our master plan consent areas as well?
Thanks, Malcolm. John, Shona, can either of you assist with that, please? John.
Yes. Yeah, essentially, what the Scottish Government are proposing under the new bill is to change the title to the Master Plan Consent Areas. The SPZ will really just stay an SPZ scheme. They're going to be using the outcomes of these 4 pilots, because there's ourselves and Argyll and Butte and another one that are doing these pilots. So once they're completed, they will use those to inform the regulations of these master plan consent areas. But there'll be probably minor changes. I think one of them will be an extension to the things that it would cover. So yeah, essentially SPZ will be the same as the master plan consent areas.
Okay, thanks, John. Malcolm, do you want to come back? You happy with that? Okay, thanks. Go to Ivor next, please.
Chair, it was just to concur with what's been said. I think this is a good way forward. It gives people a sort of definitive of what we as a planning authority are looking for in the area they might be wanting to develop their property in. And hopefully it being simplified will be down to the fact that we'll be able to rattle them through quicker. I'm understanding that's one of the concerns that you get from a lot of people out there, that seems to take a while to get through the process. So I think this is a good idea. It allows the developers to see what's required, and I think it'll allow us as a team to be concentrating maybe some more of the bigger applications like wind farms, etc. And we'll have more time. We'll get business through quicker as well. So I think that's a good thing.
Thanks, Ivor. I think that's all helpful comments. If there are no further comments or questions, just double check. I'll move to the recommendations. So at 2.1, we're asked to consider the representations received to the Hardthorn Road Dumfries Simplified Planning Zone consultation and agree the Council's response and propose modifications where relevant. That's in the appendix. Are we content with those? I'll take it that we are, as no points have been raised. At 2.2 then, are we agreed to adopt the Hardthorn Road Dumfries Simplified Planning Zone as set out in Appendix 2? And then, as we have agreed, 2.1 and 2.2, agree to the required actions for advertising and notification of the relevant parties of the SPZ's adoption. That's as set out in paragraph 3.4. Excellent. Thank you, members. Thank you, John and Shona.
Thank you.
Next item is item 9, Economic Recovery Plan Skills, Employment and Inclusion Update, report by Director Economy and Resources. We are provided with an update on developments and activity within the Skills, Employment and Inclusion workstream of our Economic Recovery Plan. The report also provides us with information on the recent announcements of support from both UK and Scottish governments, and how we can in turn support the local economy and our own workforce planning using the opportunities these announcements provide, particularly by working with partners through the Local Employability and Skills Partnership. Lynn Burgess is here to assist if members have any questions, but Lynn, I'll ask you if you have anything to add to the report first, as I recognise this is quite a fast-moving situation at present. Lynn?
Thank you, Chair. Yep, just a couple of updates since the paper was written. So from the national perspective, the No One Left Behind delivery plan has been published by Scottish Government today. And on a local basis, we've received our young person grant notification, which includes the DYW school coordinator proposal referred to in the paper. We're working with partners on the Employability and Skills Partnership to develop our local proposition within the criteria specified by Scottish Government in the Young Persons Guarantee. We're looking to include additional support and wraparound support for the Kickstart programme, and our regional approach to Kickstart has been approved by DWP, so we have initial approval for our council bid, and also our local chamber has gained approval. Thanks.
Lynn, thanks very much for that. Much appreciated. As I anticipated, this remains a fast-moving picture, and a great deal of work is being done both by our officers and by partners as well. I'll go to members' comments and questions. Archie, you're first, please.
Thanks very much, and thanks, Lynn, for the update on this particular report. I think it's good that we've got those agreements in place and opportunities to take the side of thing forward. Chair, I just wanted to come to the recommendations, where I would like to suggest a slight amendment, and that is in 2.7 on page 178. It says agree in principle any Kickstart scheme placements with the council are paid at the Scottish living wage as per current council policy. I would suggest, as it's current council policy, Chair, that we remove the word in principle, because we've already agreed that anything that comes in will be at the Scottish living wage. I understand that we'll be working with partners and things like that, but for a council perspective, and this is a council paper, that we should remove the in principle.
I'm certainly personally content with that, Archie. I think that's our policy and our objective. Let's set that out. And be clear about it. We'll be delivering this with other people, but they ought to understand what our intentions and objectives are. I've got no difficulty with that at all. So, Malcolm, I'll go to you next, please.
Thank you, Chair. This has made very interesting reading this report, and it takes you slightly back in time to the previous schemes that we've had, and I'm pleased to say that we've got a member of staff that's been with us 30 years who joined our company on a very similar basis. So I'm well aware of how good these sort of things can be. But there's a couple of wee things I kind of like to be tidied up. Page 179, 3.32, create a minimum of 36, employers can create a minimum of 30 new. So does that mean somebody needs to take on 30 people, or does that mean that it's 30 in total? Because I'm assuming it's 30 over the piece, rather than each company having to take 30, because I think you'll find in Dumfries Galloway there's not that many people will be able to take on 30 people on this basis. A handful of organisations could do that. The next thing is something I mentioned quite often when it comes to business support and our channels to get information out. Now, the Chamber does a terrific job. They've done particularly well throughout the COVID thing with regular updates, and it's been very good. But there are still a lot of businesses do not engage with that sort of organisation, and there's a whole variety of reasons why. But to get a broader uptake of this, I think we need to make sure that the information gets out there for everyone who is potentially eligible to make use of this scheme. So basically, I suppose what I'm saying is we really need to be monitoring how this is disseminated throughout the region. I mean, the council perhaps should take a role in Business Gateway, or the South of Scotland Economics should have a look at this and make sure that the information is being disseminated properly throughout all the businesses, because it's important that we get young people into employment, into structured work, and it can set them up for life. I think this is a really good idea, but some of the details maybe need a wee bit of tidying up. So if you could answer the question about the number of people, and perhaps a little bit about the roles that's expected, because the implication is that basically it's just got to be somebody shadowing somebody else. Well, people don't pick up an awful lot from that. They've got to have a role to fulfil as well.
Thanks, Malcolm. Lynn, can you assist with those points, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yep, so in relation to your first question, Councillor Johnson, the 30 is a minimum requirement from the DWP. The UK government scheme is being administered via our local partners with DWP. The two different roles in terms of the application are for a business to apply as an employer, where they would take 30 people themselves, and also for any organisation to be able to apply as a gateway. And if you're a gateway organisation, then you can recruit on behalf of other businesses. So that's the route for SMEs, which make up the majority of our business population in D&G, to go through. So the regional approach that we're taking with the Chamber, and this will lead on to your next question about the engagement, we're looking to work with the Chamber, with third sector D&G and with DWP to make sure that we reach all businesses right across the region. Broadly speaking, the Chamber will support businesses, but we will also be a gateway organisation. Where that's not appropriate, we'll be able to support businesses. There's also a number of private sector providers taking on the Kickstart programme, so there'll be other avenues that businesses could follow with those providers. And in terms of the third sector D&G are taking a lead there, so we're trying to cover all sectors with our approach. In relation to the question in terms of the roles, the roles do have to be supernumerary. So they are a work placement rather than a job role, but there is additional funding to support training. So each young person who participates in the Kickstart programme will attract £1,500, and the business is able to use that to train the young person in that role. So we would hope that there will be a sustainable opportunity for some young people in these roles, which is aligned to our young person guarantee. So in some instances, we'll be able to wrap around that support. So the Kickstart programme, for example, is for 25 hours a week. We could help with our young person guarantee to enable that to be longer, to be 36 hours a week or to be a year's placement, and that's what we're looking to model and understand and bring back in more detail to this committee in January.
Thanks, Lynn. I hope that's helpful, Malcolm. I think getting that additional detail on how we can align these things together to get the best possible opportunity by, I guess, a combination of the programmes, I think will be really important. My instinct is if we get that right, we'll probably give young people a better chance of having a valuable experience in the first place and being able to move on to something substantive after that. You want to come back, Malcolm?
No, just that was very reassuring for this, and like I said before, I wouldn't like people to underestimate the importance of this. We really need to get our young people into work, and the thing is, as Dumfries and Galloway, we need to provide opportunity for young people in this region to keep people in this region.
Fair comments, I think, Malcolm, absolutely. I'll go to Doug Fairbairn next. Doug?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, hi, Lynn. It's really to mirror Councillor Johnson. I think this is quite a wide-ranging issue, and I think I spoke to you a wee while ago, Lynn, yourself and Steve, in relation to this. It's something I'm really keen. I suppose we're all really keen about it. We want to see kids in employment and positive destinations, but I think really, are we not limiting ourselves, Lynn? You know, I mean, we're talking about third sector and various other groups. What about the smaller businesses? You know, the kind of medium to small businesses. And I know in the Scottish Borders they were targeting, you know, 2-3 man operations and engineering and stuff like that to try and get apprenticeships. So I'm just keen as to where you are with that, because I know you were doing a lot of, well, I know that you started to do a lot of work with the college, and I think education department were doing a lot as well with the college, and obviously that stopped due to the pandemic, so I don't know how much of that has restarted. But just really keen to know where you are, because I think in the youth guarantee agreements, I think in August, July, there was about 17 young people being supported. I just wondered if there was more now in the growing rural talent and the workplace skill awards, a partnership youth guarantee programme. How are you doing with all that now? Sorry, it's a bit of a wide-ranging question, but just if you can answer as much as you can, that'd be good.
Thanks, Doug. Lynn?
Yep, thanks, Councillor Fairbairn. Yeah, there's some really good points there. I should have mentioned that the college is actually part of our regional approach. So and in terms of the limits, we're not actually limiting ourselves at all. We're working very closely regionally and nationally. So we have a leaflet that's going out to all employers on our database already. We're working with DWP and the Chamber to reach out to employers through their database. So there's actually no limits to what we're doing. It's just the regional approach is more about broadly making sure that it's a quality-driven approach so that the young people get a really good experience out of that. So where it's appropriate, the young people will be supported through our Workplace Skills Award. If the placement's only 6 months, they might struggle to complete that in the timescale. So what we're trying not to do is restrict ourselves in the offers. So the college will come up with a menu of offers, but equally we'll be looking to come up with more appropriate training through other providers as well. So there's absolutely no limit. We're just at the very early stages, I think, of developing that regional approach. But I can assure you we're seeking to reach out to all organisations that will be able to support young people through Fair Start, including housing associations as well. So the other question in relation to the Young Persons Guarantee and growing rural talent, I don't have the exact numbers, but I can certainly get those for you. We do have increased numbers of young people on the guarantee now. We have round about 22, I think, young people going through the growing rural talent pathway, and we're looking to extend that into forestry. So as you might remember, that was really focused on agriculture. We're working with SDS nationally to look at whether we can use Kickstart to expand the growing rural talent and the forestry delivery of that. We're acutely aware that many of our businesses are one-man bands or self-employed, so we're looking to see how we can do that in a way that supports those businesses to be able to offer those experiences to young people as well. So I hope that answers that question, but I'm happy to come back with more detailed numbers if that would help.
No, thanks, Chair. Thanks for that, Lynn. I'd really appreciate that. That's really good, very positive. But thanks very much for your answer. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you both. Lynn, I think it would probably be helpful if we had those figures circulated to the whole committee. Just useful as giving us a kind of full understanding of the picture at the moment. That would be great, thank you. So Ivor, you're next.
Chair, it was just with regard to 2.7, Archie brought up about the placements. Is that just within the council that we would ask for the Scottish living wage, rather than if we were a gateway provider? Would we expect anybody that was picked up through that? Because I think it says that we would pick up any employer that was missed through the other approaches. Would we expect them also to pay the Scottish living wage? Because it might sound harsh, but if you get a 16-year-old coming onto this and getting the living wage, which I'll hold my hands up, not just, is it about £9 odd an hour, if not more? And then they go back into the private sector and they're getting £4.55. They're not going to be that encouraged to go back to the private sector if we've given them false expectations. And I just wonder, are we putting this in place for just the ones in the council employ, or is it the ones that we act as a gateway for?
Okay, I think in fairness we have probably a fairly well-established position that we'd like to try and see this. I think level up is the word of the moment. That we're trying to encourage the payment of the living wage across the piece in the region, because it tends to be good for employees and actually in the long term good for businesses. But I don't know if Archie had any comment that he wanted to make. I see he switched his camera on.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. Just to maybe reassure Ivor that obviously we can only influence what happens in the council, but our council policy is to actively encourage people to go on to the Scottish living wage. We can only influence what actually happens in the council with that particular wage. But I hope that employers out there would see the benefit of having that particular Scottish living wage.
Okay, thanks, Archie. I think you said that rather more clearly than I did. Ivor, I don't know if you wanted to come back, and then I think we'll go to the recommendations.
No, that's fine. It was just, if you were putting them into a private sector organisation, they might not be as keen to take them on at the Scottish living wage, when you could just go down to the job centre and get someone for half the rate, which I agree with you. The wage, the minimum wage, isn't possibly the greatest incentive to get someone to go and work for just now. But if you're training them, they need maybe that wee bit difference just to allow them to have time to train, as well as develop the young person to get them up the ladder a bit quicker and into the scheme where the living wage would be available to them.
Okay, thanks, Ivor. Let me just check in case there are any further comments or questions. I'll take it there are not. So it's a fairly lengthy set of recommendations. We'll go through them one at a time. So 2.1, Marsh to note the update on the no one left behind employability approach provided at paragraph 3.1.2, including changes to the timetable for implementation agreed between Scottish Government and COSLA. At 2.2, can we note the recent announcements from the Scottish Government on the Young Persons Guarantee and the funding available to support this? That's set out at section 3.2. At 2.3, agree that Dumfries and Galloway Council can act as a gateway organisation within the Kickstart scheme. That's as detailed at paragraph 3.4.1. We're content to agree. Thank you. At 2.4, note the provisions of the UK Government Kickstart scheme and the work the Council is leading with partners through the Local Employability and Skills Partnership to maximise the use of this scheme with private, third and public sector partners. That's at paragraph 3.4.2. Content to note. Thank you. At 2.5, note that, subject to recommendation 2.3, the number of places to be included within a bid as a gateway organisation will be determined within the Local Employability and Skills Partnership, and an update provided to this committee early in 2021 on progress. 2.6, can we agree that the Council also bids as an employer for job placements to be funded through the Kickstart scheme, which reflect a combination of health and social care partnership and social work services workforce opportunities, reflecting assessed and projected workforce needs in these sector service areas. That's as detailed at section 3.5. 2.7, and we agree that any Kickstart scheme placements with the Council are paid at the Scottish Living Wage as per current Council policy. And at 2.8, agree that a more detailed report is prepared on the Kickstart scheme, providing more detail on assessed workforce needs and reflecting funding requirements to supplement the national minimum wage, to examine scope and cost for increasing hours within the scheme from the 25 hours which will be funded for each placement, and providing information on supervision and support costs for placements. We'll get that further detail. Okay, thank you very much, members. Thanks, Lynn, for the report and also for the update as well. Very important piece of work, and I think we're all very pleased that it's making progress. If we can move on then to item 10, which is the Transformation Events Work Programme Progress Update on Our Workforce, the report by Head of People and Transformation. This report provides an update on the transformation work on the Our Workforce theme. The report reflects the programme that we agreed in February this year and the steps that have been taken to make progress with this, but it also clearly reflects the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, not just on the programme, but also the significant learning and reflection that it's provided for our workforce on how we adapt to the future. Mike Shepley, Stuart Clanahan and James McDowell are all here to assist members if they have any questions. Before we go to questions, gentlemen, is there anything that you'd like to add to the report, please?
Not at this stage, Chair, but welcome any questions in relation to the detail within the report.
Thanks very much. We'll go to questions and comments. Archie?
Thanks very much, Chair. I'm looking at page 185 and item number 3, helping our workforce to adapt. And specifically the third last bullet point, building resilience, health and wellbeing, obviously being the health and wellbeing champion for elected members. It's really important that our workforce understand what's actually going on. And also at a time of change, of course, it's usual that there's some people who don't like change. There are people who like change. There's obviously different stressors in people's lives as well. And I'm just wondering if there's an opportunity here to build up under that health and well-being sort of movement, a sort of toolbox of tools that we can use to help members of staff. And I'm talking about things like, you know, if there is a problem working at home, that they need to work at, you know, in an office, we've got that particular route to go. If there are particular items of equipment that can help people, we've got that particular route to go. If we have packages of things that will help people moving forward in this whole sort of project, because we are looking at a leaner, meaner, smarter type workforce in the future. However, some people may not understand what that actually means and may challenge on a regular basis. But if we've got these toolboxes in place, perhaps it's something we can discuss with Mike and Stuart going forward.
Thanks,
Archie. Mike, can I hand over to you for assistance with those points,
sure.
please?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Dryborough. They were obviously with regards to the workforce. One of the things we're currently undertaking is a review of our current workforce strategy and the drafting of a new strategy to commence from next year. And quite clearly, there will be a number of initiatives that we will look to engage the workforce, the council and members with regards to the developing the resilience across our workforce, and obviously any consideration will be taken through the various other forums as well, such as health and well-being. So I think it's a case of, with regards to developing that resilience and building capacity and capability, I guess it is the work is ongoing, and no idea is deemed to be a bad idea. But certainly a toolkit is something that we will certainly consider and develop going forward.
Thanks, Mike. I'll go to Ivor next.
Thank you, Chair. Within the background at 3.1, it says to succeed post-COVID-19 will depend greatly on having the right people with the right skills. How do we know we've got the right people and we're not just shoehorning people into positions that possibly they don't want to be in, but we need that position filled? Do we have the toolbox to make sure that we are getting the right people in the right place?
Thank you, Councillor. One of the things that we are undertaking at the moment is to design a building capability framework that will look at a number of areas of excellence, and one of those, or a number of those, obviously are around talent management, employee engagement and learning and development. And to ensure that, first of all, in terms of having the right people, then obviously we will be looking at the ability of our service managers to work with their teams, in the essence around highlighting performance and also potential within the teams for people to progress, for those who wish to progress, but equally for those who don't have a high degree of career aspiration, but equally are completely motivated to come in and be the best that they can be. And going forward, our strategy and our framework will support both those instances. And equally with regards to assessing the right skills in the right place, we are currently undertaking a piece of work around our learning needs analysis through the learning and development team, and into next year obviously we will look to develop that learning needs analysis, and equally look to also pick that up at pace by way of support from our digital team with regards to ensuring that we can at pace deliver on the requirement to build the necessary capability across the organisation that allows us to be more agile in the face of the current challenges and possible future challenges going forward.
Thank you, Mike. I'll bring Elaine in next. Elaine?
Thanks, Chair. My question was in regard to page 185 and the very bullet point at the top about developing further relationships with partners and a joint approach, arrangements for retaining retention. We did have some discussions in the past with the NHS about the possibility of joint recruitments, of joint progression for people, say, for example, coming in as social care workers and then being able to retrain and work in the health service. The possibility, for example, of retraining staff who currently work for the council but whose posts may no longer be available because of transformation. This was pre-COVID, and I just wondered whether what sort of progress. Obviously, both the NHS and the council have been very preoccupied with the problems around COVID, but I just wondered if there had been much progress on that, because I think there's a lot of potential there for us working with the NHS to look at our recruitment and retention issues over the piece.
In terms of progress, I've reached out to my colleague in the local NHS and Integration Board and are currently awaiting an invite to meet with that team and obviously to understand our issues and how we can better work in more greater collaboration and co-creation going forward. Currently, with regards to the NHS, obviously the work that Lynn has reported on previously, we are also supporting that and are due to meet later this week with regards to the Kickstart programme and obviously skill development jointly and in co-creation. I think going forward, it is fair to say that our approach to our workforce strategy and our overall skills development will be one that considers both the youth and also the requirements for greater agility around the services, and certainly one of multi-skilling will be a key driver going forward. Again, so that we have a greater level of agility across the organisation and a greater depth and breadth of skills. Equally, that will allow us to undertake such matters as better workforce planning, succession planning, etc., all linked into the capability framework that I referenced earlier.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. I'll go to Doug Fairbairn and then Dougie Campbell.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for that, Mike. Just to touch on a couple of things, really. Obviously, we're right out the ballpark now in relation to the coronavirus and the way we work, and things have changed beyond recognition. So there's a couple of things, really, I'm sure you'll be quite aware of. I mean, I've been approached on a number of occasions by members of staff with certain concerns in relation to working at home, which everybody feels quite comfortable with to a degree. They don't have to travel, so we're going back to the environmental policy where there's a whole lot of things involved in that that's helping us as a council forward in a lot of agendas. But I think really it's a kind of isolation thing, and I think you touched on it just previously there. I think because people are working at home, I don't know how the rest of the elected members feel, but you had that transition where you could go away and go to meetings and such like, but your work is your home. You know, your home is your work, whereas you had that separation. You could go away, go to your work, come back, do what you need to do. But now I think a lot of council employees feel that they're working above and beyond. So whether they finish their work at 5 o'clock, they're dipping in at 7, 8, you know, there's early morning start. So I think there's a lot more work getting done by council officers and employees of the council. I don't know how you feel with that one and the kind of feedback you've had. Also, you touched on people that want to progress. There'll be an awful lot of people out there who want to progress, but we're living in a completely different environment. And I think studies have been done in relation to teams, how people are, you know, we're all right sitting having this conversation just now, but we are remote, you know, we're not in touch with ourselves. So I think the people that maybe want to progress or move on to the next step or whatever they want to do, they maybe feel slightly out of touch with that. So how do we kind of like rearrange that way of thinking in the new council we're in just now?
Thank you, Councillor Fairbairn, and really relevant points with regards to both the here and now and the future. Quite clearly, working from home and the mindset and behaviours around that has changed considerably within certainly within the last 12 months. And going forward, clearly working from home and greater flexible working practices are here to stay. With regards to supporting colleagues who working from home will be more suitable for, quite clearly we have to ensure that we have the necessary leadership skills to ensure that we maintain our ability to undertake strength-based conversations with colleagues working from home, and that we use the available technology to be more creative in how we undertake those strength-based conversations, how we coach our staff, and equally how we overall support them. And there are a number of vehicles that we have within the council, obviously through the assessment of skills development and a greater blended learning approach, but also through such strategic groups and strategic thinking around health and well-being. And we're currently looking at this moment in time with regards to reaching out to all staff with regards to the management of their health and well-being away from the traditional workplace. So I guess in overall answer, Councillor Fairburn, it is to ensure that we have the necessary leadership and management skills to ensure that all our colleagues still are able to retain that sense of purpose, whether they are in a council-owned workplace situation or indeed working from home. But it is still very much one of, again, having those necessary conversations that feel that all staff, wherever they are, feel supported and can undertake basically can undertake initiatives that will support their developments should they wish to do so.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Chair.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mike. I'll go to Dougie Campbell next, and then I think we'll turn to the recommendations. Dougie? I'm assuming Dougie might be having difficulty with the mute button. I'll give him a moment to see if he can.
Apologies, Chair. I was well into my monologue there. I'll start again. It's just following on from what I think was a very powerful point made by Doug Fairbairn in relation to home working and what he said about, the workplace becomes your home and your home becomes the workplace. And clearly there have been a lot of benefits during the lockdown period in terms of the ability of people to work from home. That there also is an issue, I think, in terms of health and well-being, and the fact that a lot of staff are sort of isolated and might feel that there's the lack of support there for them. And my specific question for Mike is in relation to the experience that our staff who are working from home just now, what analysis has been done with in this opportunity to capture some really important data? So what analysis has been carried out now to help inform the agenda for our workforce and through transformation?
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. And again, with the same degree of vigour as I just responded to Councillor Fairbairn, I have ensured that the Health and Wellbeing Forum is very much brought to the forefront, and with the support of Councillor Dryborough and my team, we have very much prioritised work in this area. And going forward, we have undertaken a current assessment of the current state of our ability to work with people that are not necessarily easily seen because they're working from home across a very large expanse of this region. But certainly with the assistance of the service managers and the feedback we get from them, the work of the mental health champions, and I believe there are approximately about 100 of those, and also our ability as leaders to very much remain in touch and to very much consider the inclusivity of our colleagues, is that going forward we will obviously look at our metrics and look to gather intel in such metrics as managing attendance and performance-related metrics to be able to understand the intel around those metrics and what the underlying trends may well be, and to deal proactively with any trend analysis for the benefit of both our colleagues and the council, and obviously for the maintenance of the services that we provide. So I think it is fair to say that it is very much at the forefront of the work that we are currently doing in terms of the health and well-being and the protection of all our colleagues. And just recently, one of my service areas, the BTS, have undertaken a project that enables us now to have iTrent operate in the cloud, which allows us to potentially allow access for circa 2,000 staff that previously didn't have opportunity to connect with the council, and obviously that's something we will pursue going forward. So very much supporting the overall ambition to be an inclusive council and to ensure that no matter where our colleagues are working, that we very much remain in contact and also undertake that analysis that allows us to proactively support all our colleagues in this difficult time.
Could I come in briefly, Chair?
Yes, do you, of course.
Mike, in terms of what you were saying there about identifying the themes, will that feature in subsequent reports? Because I think it's important that we all have a clear understanding of the pros and cons around home working, and I think it would be interesting to see that data laid out in a report in future.
Absolutely, Councillor Campbell, and also we will also undertake work to benchmark our work across and with the support of the COSLA, the Improvement Service, and our own individual networks to ensure that we are operating up there with best practice. And that absolutely this is deemed very much by myself as Head of Service as a framework and a process that should be clearly transparent, and equally that any trend analysis that we come across will help to make better informed decisions that will equally be articulated through future reporting.
Thank you, Mike. I think we've given that a good airing. I think if there are no further comments or questions, I'll go to the recommendations. So members, are we content to note the progress achieved in the work programme pre-COVID-19 as detailed in the report? And at 2.2, to agree the approach as outlined in the appendix to build better capacity and capability across our workforce. Stephen Thompson, you want to come in?
Yeah, I mean, just on the back of the sort of quite hearty discussion there with members, I mean, do we need to then articulate that we'll receive that benchmarking data back in terms of working at home or not, that Mike had indicated the work would be carried out?
So Mike, happy to be advised by you about when we can look to get that.
We were currently undertaking work now to understand the complexities of working from home and the impact on our workforce. And going forward, we will look at the next committee to offer an update with regards to what that business intelligence and analysis tells us. And obviously, going forward, we are, as I've instigated earlier. We are clearly looking to draft a new workforce strategy, which again will be influenced by that data. So it will either be through a draft proposal for the workforce strategy, or indeed if there is a minor report with regards to benchmarking data that is worthy of bringing to this committee, certainly we would take it to our chair and vice chair meetings in the first instance, and then I would assume discussion there with regards to how we then disseminate that data and that analysis through future meetings. But it's certainly one that we will not shy away from assessing and detailing the relevance to the work that we're doing here in Dumfries and Galloway.
So I think I think the report as you outlined to the next committee would be really helpful, and there is obviously quite wide interest amongst the members in how this all works and how these pretty profound changes have affected our staff and how we deal with them. So I think if we could do that, I think that would be excellent. Okay, so if members are content with that, we will move on. And thank you, Mike, Stuart and James for attending, much appreciated. We'll move on to item 11, following which I would intend to take a short break, because 2.5 hours in front of screens, I think, is without a break is more than enough for everybody. However, at this point, we'll move on to item 11, which is the Economy and Resources Revenue Budget Monitoring Report 2021, and it's for the period ended 30th September 2020. The report is by Director of Economy and Resources. This report gives members an overview of the financial performance of the services within Economy and Resources for the period to end September 2020. I'm pleased to note that the projected position for the services and that a balanced budget is forecast overall. Information on the costs of COVID-19 associated with Economy and Resources services are also provided. As previously reported to this committee, the costs of COVID-19 are being dealt with on a cross-council basis rather than impacting on the core budget of individual services. Gillian Ross is with us to assist if members have any questions. Gillian, before I do that, is there anything you wish to add to the report?
No, there's nothing to add to the report. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Gillian. Malcolm?
Thank you, Chair. In the great scheme of things in this budget monitoring report, which was for the current financial year, it's actually page 192, 3.8. Now, I wonder if someone could explain to me why this is in this particular budget monitoring report, given that it's relating to this financial year, and that the impact of the item mentioned there will not be until next financial year. Also, the report was up to the end of September. The decision was taken on the 6th of October. This looks to me as if it's been put in there as almost as a slap in the wrist for councillors and the decision that they made with regard to the community asset transfer. I took the time to revisit the papers, and I don't want to restart the discussion. We had a lengthy discussion on the day, and I don't want to go back through it. I've looked through the figures, and I've got to say I don't think I would have came to a different decision. And this just looks to me, like I say, like it's been put in as a slap in the wrist for councillors, and I would like to understand if that is or isn't the case.
I'm sure that officers would never presume to slap us on the wrist, Malcolm. Gillian, I don't know if there's anything that you want to clarify there. And then I have Ronnie Nicholson wanting to speak. Gillian?
Yep, sure. Just to confirm that it is basically just simply to highlight to members that there is an issue that we will need to address as part of the budget development process. And because we're now in the proceeds of developing that process, it's just to really keep it in terms of in members' eyesight that basically as part of the budget development process we will need to address that budget pressure as a result of that decision. In terms of the reason why it's included in there when it's an end of September report, I think we've maybe highlighted to other committees, as part of the Finance, Procurement and Transformation Committee, that we always try to provide members with the most up-to-date information, and that's why we've basically reflected it within the report.
Thank you, Gillian. Ronnie?
No, I quite agree with Gillian. We've
you know, it's no good, however uncomfortable it might be for some members. The decisions taken, if they have an impact, everybody's got to know about that, however little or however much it might be. And that decision, the £20,000, you've got to find out £20,000 budget pressure, and it's quite right to highlight that, whether it's £20,000 or £20.
Thank you, Ronnie. Do I have any other questions or comments? I will take it there are not, in which case we will go to the recommendations. So can we note 2.1, the anticipated financial pressures of the COVID-19 pandemic within the Economy and Resources budget as detailed at sections 3.1, 3.4 and Appendix 1, and that these pressures have been included within the overall financial implications of COVID-19 presented to the Finance, Procurement and Transformation Committee on 17th November. Can we further note at 2.2, progress against delivery of the agreed savings applied to the 2021 budget for each service function as reflected in Appendix 2. And at 2.3, progress against the delivery of the agreed policy development allocations applied to the 2021 budget as detailed in Appendix 3. Thank you very much. Members, we'll take a short break. I suggest reconvene at 1:20. Thank you. So, good afternoon, members, and welcome back. I see the comments in the chat. I can confirm we have started, slightly later than I'd anticipated, for which my apologies. We are at item 12, which is Town Centre Living Fund 2021 report by Head of Economy and Development. This report presents recommendations to allocate funding from the Council's Town Centre Living Fund for 2020-2021 for a project at Station Road, Dalbeattie, and to support the project at Academy Street, Castle Douglas, to provide 16 homes, including 2 amenity bungalows, with a number of these homes being built to the Passive House standard. The report also advises that if taken, these decisions would fully commit the funding available for this financial year. Jamie Little's here to assist if members have any questions. Jamie, before we do that, I'll check whether you have anything to add, please.
Thanks, Chair. Nothing further to add to the report at this stage.
Thank you, Jamie. I'll go to members' questions and comments. Archie?
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. I'm just looking at the allocation of the £225,000, which fits in really well with what this application actually is about. I see that we'll have spent up our £500,000 on the Town Centre Living Fund. I think some of the projects that have come forward are right and are able to move forward, and I would fully support the recommendations, Chair.
Thank you very much, Archie. I particularly welcome the inclusion of houses built to Passive House standard. I do think that is really welcome, and we would certainly, I think, wish to see more of these across the region, and indeed, I think in particular, more of these provided as affordable housing, as well as in the general stock. So I see Dougie Campbell, you have your hand up. I'll go to you next. Dougie?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Can hear you fine. Carry on, Dougie.
Yeah, okay. It was to ask Jamie the question, and further to your comments, Chair, about the passive houses. I think there's 8. Just a straightforward question. Why not all 16 houses being built as passive houses? Has there been any sort of, or can Jamie provide any kind of more detail in terms of why it's a combination? Obviously, passive houses are the gold standard in effect in terms of energy efficiency. But is there any particular reason for this development being limited to just 8 passive houses? And what influence do we have over Lorburn in terms of maximising the construction of passive houses?
Thank you, Dougie. Jamie?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. In particular, to the question, the reason is actually down to the way that the properties are heated. All the properties will be built in exactly the same way. It's really down to the site orientation, where there's an expectation that a lot of the heat comes from the sun and the sunlight. So from a technical point of view, the 8 of the houses can effectively point the right way so that they can maximise the benefit of the sun. The remaining 8 aren't able to. However, they will still be built to exactly the same standard. It is only on that point of their orientation where they will be unable to achieve what is a passive house accreditation. They will still be built to exactly the same standards, though. Yeah,
thanks, Jamie. That's really helpful. I suspected it was around the kind of technical issues, but that's very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Dougie. Thank you, Jamie. I'll check to see whether there are any further questions or comments. I don't think that there are. So in that case, we'll go to the recommendations. So at 2.1, we're asked to agree the allocation of £225,000 from the 2021 Town Centre Living Fund to Lorburn Housing Association to enable delivery of the Strategic Housing Investment Plan project at Station Road, Dalbeattie. That's section 3.3 and detailed in the appendix. Are we content to agree? And 2.2, note that subject to agreement of this report's recommendation, which we have just done, the Town Centre site's allocation of £500,000 from this year's Town Centre Living Fund will be fully committed. That's as detailed at paragraph 3.4. Are we content to note that? Excellent. Thank you very much, members. Thank you, Jamie. move on to item 13, which is the Economic Development Capital Programme 2020 to 2023 Monitoring and Progress Report, a report by the Head of Economy and Development. This report provides information on progress with the delivery of the economic development asset class, including information on the wide range of individual projects and expenditure incurred to 30th September 2020. We're also provided with a further update on the progress of the funding allocated from the initial Town Centre Capital Fund, which is making progress, and I particularly welcome the further funding offered by Scottish Government of $548,000 to top up the Town Centre Capital Fund. And we are being asked how we will make progress with the allocations of money within the report. Melissa McGarry and Simon Fieldhouse are here to assist if members have any questions. Melissa, Simon, is there anything that you'd like to add before we go to members' questions?
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm, it's just myself. Melissa's actually off on leave this week, so happy to take any questions, Chair.
Okay, thanks very much, Simon. So I'll go straight to members. Elaine?
Thanks, Chair. My question relates to the Regeneration Capital Grant Fund for the projects. Now, members all who were on the ad hoc COVID-19 subcommittee will remember that we discussed 5 projects at that meeting, and we were asked to prioritise them, and we were given various bits of information. And in particular, we were advised that the Keller Home Skills Innovation Centre had already been submitted to a previous round, and that we had reasons from the Scottish Government as to why the application was unsuccessful. And we were also advised of a number of measures that had been taken to address the problems that had been identified, including the allocation of $1.284 million from the South of Scotland Economic Partnership, and also the involvement of Kirkconnell Keller Home Development Trust, who we had agreed, I think, to allocate some funding of between 150 and 500k to help them to take the project forward. So I was therefore rather concerned to see in 4.23, first of all, that they hadn't been submitted despite the indication to the ad hoc subcommittee, but also that there were a number of issues in relation to each that would present a material risk to our council. So first of all, I'd like to know what that material risk is, given the information that was provided to the ad hoc subcommittee. And secondly, Councillor Jim Dempster tells me that the chair of the project in Selkirk has told him that they've now been told that instead of submitting these as 3 separate projects, they have to be submitted as one project. And that again concerns me, because we also know that from a couple of years ago, when the Stove project was submitted as one project alongside the Rosefield Mills and the Veterans Garden, that project fell despite the fact that Stove was a good project, because neither Rosefield Mills nor the Veterans Garden were sufficiently progressed to be eligible. So I just would wonder if that is the case, that they are going to be submitted as one project, why we are doing that after the experience of that previous project being unsuccessful. And would it not be better to submit them as individual projects? But most of all, I want to know what's gone wrong with the Keller Home Skills and Innovation Centre, given how positive it looked in June. Thank you.
Thanks, Elaine. Simon, can you assist with these, please?
Aye, thank you, Chair. In relation to the last point, obviously made by Councillor Murray, we're not planning to submit these as one application. I can confirm that they would be submitted as individual applications as and when they are ready to be presented to RCGF for the next stage of application. So that hopefully that sort of puts that point obviously to rest at this moment in time. In relation to the progress, obviously progress has been made, but progress has been interrupted on all 3 applications that we brought to the ad hoc sort of subcommittee earlier on in the year, in relation obviously to progressing those applications through. What we've got projects that are not at the stage where we would feel comfortable that they could be submitted to the RCGF, with that being looked on favourably through the funding stream. that obviously is coming from the Scottish Government. So in terms of the material risks that we're kind of identifying within the report, obviously the Council is the body that obviously submits the applications to the RCGF and would draw down the funding on behalf of the applicant. But obviously within that, the Council is subject obviously to the grant conditions laid out through the RCGF scheme, and it would be the Council obviously that could potentially be at risk unless we passed over all liability to the community groups which haven't got the projects at a development ready stage. So the material risk is obviously one of perception and also sort of reputational risk in relation obviously to applying to the fund in future years. So we wanted to make sure that the projects were ready, and it is very disappointing from an officer's perspective as well that these projects have not been able to get to a point where they are deliverable. In relation to the Keller Home project, obviously, particularly obviously we had grant funding coming down from SOSEP to assist with that. The project has changed dramatically, obviously, with the engagement of the Kirkconnell Development Trust, and obviously they are now taking the lead forward with that. Their design architects are not at a point where they feel that the project is ready to be submitted, and it requires further changing to ensure, obviously, that it's robust and sustainable. And I hope that's provided a bit of reassurance.
Thank you, Simon.
Yeah, thank you.
Elaine, do you want to come back?
Well, just to say thanks for the information. Obviously, it's been progress hasn't been able to be made at the speed we would have hoped back in June. And it's not just about COVID, because COVID was an issue in June. So, but if it is something which the trust has now discovered, I suppose we have given them that. That responsibility in terms of taking it forward, and if they feel it's not yet ready for it, then it's very disappointing, because that's a couple of times when we've hoped to make progress and we haven't been able to make progress, but I guess we have to take it as it is.
Okay, thanks, Elaine. I'll go to Richard next. Richard Brody.
Thanks, Chair, for that. Looking at Appendix 5, there are 5 good projects here for the Town Centre Regeneration Fund. None of them in the east of the region. Maybe there's some reason for that. But we do have a shovel-ready project in Annan, which has got the support of the Annan Regeneration Committee, which is made up of the councillors and local groups. That's the Annan Harbour group. It's got a transformative proposal in the agenda there, and your papers there. It will regenerate a part of Annan. It will create jobs, and it will bring visitors into Annan Town Centre and help businesses, which is badly needed, especially since we lost Pinnies a couple of years ago. So I noticed that the final list of projects have to be agreed at the next meeting. So I wonder if that could be an option there, or we'll get advice from Simon how we proceed with that. Also, it'd be good to have a sort of impact study of how these 5 projects and other projects would impact on the local economy and regenerate the town centres. Thanks.
Thanks, Richard. Simon, can you assist with those questions, please?
All right, thank you, Chair. I think sort of in short, the 5 projects obviously have been identified and brought forward because of the requirements and the additional funding that we've got. I'm acutely aware that obviously the Annan sort of harbour project was supported through some of the TCCF work that we've already sort of submitted, and obviously sort of the attached paper, which I think is Appendix 3 or 4, obviously sort of demonstrates the value of that project. There is a significant amount of funding that we're working obviously with officers within the strategic projects team and the local solutions team to obviously identify the most appropriate conduit to move that project forward, as we recognise there is a value there. But we'll try and bring back, obviously, as it's referenced, a later report, which obviously contains some of the details that Councillor Brodie's alluded to.
Okay, thank you, Simon. I'll go to Ian Carruthers next. Ian?
Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Chair. It was similar to what Councillor Brodie just put up, Simon. So I was looking at the recommendation 2.3. Sorry, I think you've already identified that they're mixed up. I think appendices 3 and 4. I think it's opposite way around. So it's appendix 3 in particular, in regards to Annan Harbour and the business case that's laid out there. I felt it was very strong when you read it, and obviously being local to that area, like Richard, there's a lot of things going on there that are very positive, it seems like. Hopefully we hear before too long what's going on there. But I just felt we should have been looking at that sooner rather than later and trying to support it. Is there a way of prioritising that, bringing that forward as part of the Appendix 5? That is my question. You've maybe answered that, but I do think because of potential, what's coming off there, the level of local support and the chance of that actually coming, that project being realised, I do think that the council should be looking at it seriously.
Okay, thank you, Ian. I mean, Simon, if I've understood it rightly, we are going to get more information on this so that we can see how we take it forward. Am I right? I think that's what you said in answer to the last question.
Yes, Chair. I mean, we'll be bringing back another report, obviously, which outlines more about the TCF, sort of the additional requirements to ensure, obviously, that that's cited and members have got the opportunity to input that on in January. In relation, obviously, to Councillor Carruthers' point around, obviously, the Annan Harbour. My understanding, obviously, if we read through Appendix 3, I believe it's on page 229, that obviously it's identifying about a £1.1 million sort of shortfall in funding at this moment in time, that we're very careful to obviously look at how we can support that moving forward, but that wouldn't be available as we don't have that much in the TCSCF at this moment in time. So we're looking at what other funding measures may come through.
Thanks, Chair. So hopefully we'll see that in January, some kind of update, Chairman, so we can add value. I think there'll be some value that can be added at that point.
Okay, thank you, Ian. Simon, I understand correctly, we are going to see that in January, is that right?
We are indeed, Chair.
That's excellent, thank you very much. Let me just check. Ronnie Tate, you have your hand up, I think. You next.
Thanks, Chair. It's just again on page 229. The capital funding strategy. Is these amounts that are on the right hand side column, have these all been applied for and approved?
Simon?
Thanks, Chair. My understanding is that a number of them have either been applied for and approved, or have just been applied for and they're waiting funding outcomes. And obviously, as I say, there is the 1.1 million there that is a shortfall at this moment in time.
Okay, thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much, Ronnie. Thank you, Simon. I'll pause in case there are further comments or questions. Sorry, Elaine, you want to come back in?
Yes, it's a different point. It's just, again, as attention has been drawn to page 229, I'm just wondering about the reference to borderlands, because as far as I'm aware, nothing has been decided in terms of the place. Well, as we'll find out on Thursday, nothing has been decided with regard to the place programme, and I don't actually see anything that at the moment would fit with borderlands. Doesn't mean to say it wouldn't happen, but that one, I don't think it's even been applied for, never mind agreed.
Yeah, I think that's a fair, it's an absolutely fair reflection. But this is another organisation's document, I suppose. Simon?
Aye, thank you, Chair. I will endeavour to go back and obviously just seek some clarification on that particular point. Borderlands did flash up to myself, but obviously, as I say, this has obviously been supplied by the Annan Harbour Group, but I shall go back and obviously just double check those figures.
Okay, thank you very much, Simon. If there are no further comments or questions, we'll go to the recommendations. So at 2.1, are we content to note the expenditure under the Economic Development Asset Class Capital Programme from April to September of this year, as set out in Appendix 1. Note the project progress updates as set out in Appendix 2. Note the contents of the executive summary from Stranraer Water Sports Association Town Centre Capital Funded Feasibility Study as set out in Appendix 4, I think it is. And the executive summary of Annan Harbour Regeneration Group's Town Centre Capital Funded Feasibility Study as set out in Appendix 3. Agree the short list of projects for potential allocations from the Town Centre Fund 2021 as set out in Appendix 5. And finally, at 2.5, agree to receive a further report on final allocations of the Town Centre Fund 2021 at the next meeting of this committee. Okay, thank you very much, members. Thank you, Simon. Move on to item 14, which is the Dumfries Galloway Council Office Accommodation Strategy, report by Head of Economy and Development. This report seeks our agreement to the development of a new office accommodation strategy in light of our transformation programme, including our digital and workforce developments, alongside the Council's new priority on carbon reduction and the climate emergency. The proposals will also assess the impact of COVID-19 on accommodation and will be developed in consultation with staff, members and the joint trades unions. Paul McCulloch is here to assist if members have any questions. Paul, is there anything you'd like to add at this point, please?
Thank you, Chair. Just a slight correction at paragraph 312.
paragraph 312 refers to coming back to committee for approval in April. It will be June to bring it in line with Appendix 2, which is the timeframe. Happy to take questions, Chair.
Thanks very much, Paul. We'll go to members' questions or comments. Ronnie?
Yeah, it's more a comment about the strategy, the overall, looking at how office accommodation. I understand the need because there aren't as many people working from offices, and we've got an overabundance office accommodation. But on the other hand, I think what's got to be taken into consideration with this strategy as well is that, the offices that are in town centres throughout the region, they do play a big impact on town centre, shopping, businesses, other businesses within the town centres throughout the region. And I think that has to be taken into consideration when looking at all council accommodation as well as a strategy.
Thanks, Ronnie. I do take the point. We don't exist in a vacuum, and I think it's an important thing to bear in mind. I'll take Ivor next.
Thank you, Chair. I think one of the things from looking at this is maybe I've been around too long in this game, but back when I was leader, back in the dark old past, there was a strategy, and we looked at it, of building a new council office. From recollection, it was down about where the former art college is. And it was going to be 3 or 4 pods, where I think it was called a central atrium. I think it's called, the fancy word for architectural glass house. And we would let one out to private sector. We would use 3. We would have reduced carbon because it'd be a modern building and stuff like this. Now, that's 2007, and here we are in nearly 2021 saying we're going to start a strategy. Now, the big issue I have is by the time this comes in place, we might have more technical development whereby we don't need the same amount of desks as what we've actually put into this strategy. How fluid will this accommodation strategy be, so that we can take into account any modern or developments with ICT, which might result in us not requiring the 1,500 desks that we might need? It might be down to 1,000 or less.
Thanks, Ivor. Paul?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Ivor. So the first part of Ivor's comment, that Ivor's absolutely right. Modern fit-for-purpose office accommodation has been delivered successfully elsewhere in the country, and normally it's across the sort of public sector where they can co-locate. What we've got in the region is a varied list of buildings in varied geographical locations, and obviously, with regards to how we take that forward, we're limiting what we can do at this stage. And in regard to the second part of the question, if you look at the office accommodation strategy, the intention is that this will be an annual report and that the office accommodation will be monitored on an ongoing basis. So we're not just going to have a go at a strategy here and just put it on the shelf for another 4 or 5 years. It'll be regularly monitored to try and get us more in line with the actual ratio that we're targeting. But notwithstanding that, and I think as part of this exercise, the lessons we've learned through the COVID pandemic need to be factored in. And I listened to comments made earlier around about people working from home and the issues that can cause. So it's a joint effort here. We're working with our colleagues in HR, we're working with our colleagues in IT to ensure that we get a collaborative, joined-up approach. You'll see within the actual programme that we're looking to come out to members as well as staff and trade unions to get as a collective position as we can in order that we can firm this up for June next year. But in terms of ongoing, monitored constantly and reported annually. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Paul. Ivor, I hope that is helpful. And I think that we need to be responsive to how things develop and change. it may very well be that we're at a period of, or we're undergoing a period of extreme disruption, and nothing necessarily goes back to exactly the way it was in terms of how we work and what we expect of our staff. I'll pause and check for any further contributions. Okay, members. Councillor Thompson, I had you noted and then forgot all about you. My apologies.
Thanks, Chair. I'll not take that to heart. I think I welcome the report. I think the strategy needs sort of refreshed, obviously, particularly in light of the current challenges we face. I think it's long been known we've got too many assets and we struggle sometimes to maybe find the best repurposing for them. Just on the point that was made by Paul there, I think there is something in the, you could have a situation now where there's 20 workstations in a building and actually post-COVID you might need to take into account obviously the distancing between the workstations, so you might need the same space for fewer people to work in with fewer workstations. There's a lot of permutations, so I think as long as we're flexible and designing spaces in line with the most efficient policies as well as our environmental and climate concerns, then I think that stands us in good stead to be flexible. I'm drawn to 3.20 where it talks about in the report the acquisitions and disposals policy. I think this has come up a couple of times, maybe peripherally, just to do with asset transfers and properties becoming surplus to requirements. But I think members would probably welcome that being brought back to this committee. Presumably it will be this committee or full council. But is there any indication when that might come back? Because I think we really do need to tighten the flow chart, if you like, because there seems to be a few gaps where things can sort of get lost in time, as it were, and members aren't always clear what the process is, especially where common goods involved, which affects a number of our properties. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. I'm going to bring Lorna here. Lorna in on that point, please.
Just to confirm to members that there'll be a report to FPT committee, I would believe, for that's where the policy is owned, in January, February, whenever the meeting's scheduled, with a view that it will align with the process that we're doing around the office accommodation, and similarly a consultation with members. So it's really about the policy intent. We'll look at the procedures as well, but it's really about the kind of intent and alignment with CAT and other things as well.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Lorna. Move on to Doug Fairbairn, please.
Thanks, Chair. It's a bit of $1 million question, really. I suppose it's really touching on what Ivor and everybody else has been saying. But Paul, how do you envisage the future council-wise, building-wise? And I know we're touching on it just now, what we've got, what we haven't got, what we need. But how do you, and I'm not putting you in a spot, I just want to know how you would think just now, how you envisage the council in the future.
I think probably puts you on the spot a bit, Paul, but,
Yeah.
Tell us what you think.
So obviously, look, we've got a clear agenda here of fewer and better assets. That's a driver from a property perspective. I think through the whole COVID pandemic, we have learned to work differently, but that's came with its own issues, and we've heard those discussed in committee today. But I think as we go forward, particularly with our office accommodation, sort of hub and spoke approach, where we have hub offices in set locations, we have satellite offices that staff can touch down in. And that seems to be a way that a lot of public sector organisations are going. The move to more home working and support through IT systems to allow that to happen is something else that we need to take cognizance of. So I think there's a lot of things we can do, and there's a lot of ways that we can rationalise our office estate to make it fit for purpose for the future. And as I say, that will be under constant review.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Paul. Ivor, you want to come back in?
It was just one point that Stephen mentioned that sort of rang a bell with me. See, when we're actually looking at which buildings we might not require, do we ever take into account, well, we could redevelop this into housing, or we could redevelop that into that? Because, well, I currently walk in the odd time into work, and I come past Wood Bank, I come past Elm Bank. They're both sitting boarded up. Is there not a way that they could be put into either housing or something? as a council, we could maybe look to apply for planning permission, and then that might actually allow us to bring in some income so that we could redevelop the offices quicker.
Thanks, Ivor. Paul?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thanks, Ivor. So, in terms of the way that we dispose of our properties, we now seek pre-planning application advice in order that we can include that within the schedule of particulars. We also review the local development plan for the area to determine, you know, in terms of the location, what the vacant property can be used for. In terms of Ivor's question around applying for planning consent, applying for planning consent kind of takes you down a road. If you go for the more generalised approach of getting clarity from the planners on what types of uses would be supported, and that could be commercial, it could be housing, it could be various other things. That what we're hoping to do by taking that approach is to open up the opportunity to the marketplace, so that we're not saying this is Woodbank, it's for sale, and it's to be flats. What we're saying is this is Woodbank and it's for sale, and it can be a range of things. So what we're trying to do is generate market interest, because there may be organisations coming at it from a housing perspective, but there also may be organisations coming at it who maybe want offices or, you know, a hotel or whatever. So we're just trying to keep that high level to broaden the uses that could be achieved through planning consent to take things forward.
Thanks very much, Paul. If there are no further comments or questions, I'll go to the recommendations. So at 2.1, can we agree the policy intent of the Office Accommodation Strategy as set out in paragraphs 3.5 and 3.6? And at 2.2, can we agree the timetable for the development of the strategy as set out in paragraph 3.3 and detailed in Appendix 2? Okay, thank you very much, members. Thank you, Paul. Next item, item 15, is the Property, Buildings, Other Asset Class Capital Programme 2020-21 Monitoring Report by Head of Economy and Development. This report updates members with progress on the Non-Schools Property and Buildings Capital Programme to the 30th of September 2020. Beg your pardon. We've been asked to agree to changes to the programme in relation to fire systems and emergency lighting at Annan Town Hall, works which are necessary at Castle Douglas Swimming Pool and also at the Dumfries Ice Bowl, in that case in particular the ventilation to mitigate risk of transmission of COVID-19 in line with national and professional guidance. Paul McCulloch is still with us to respond to any questions members have. Paul, have you anything to add at this point?
Thanks, Chair. Nothing to add. Happy to take questions.
Thanks, Paul. We'll go to members' questions and comments. John Martin.
Thanks, Chair. Paul, it's just this wondering, could you give us an update on the Ice Bowl? Because we knew, as I say, we know with the issues that we're having with the ventilation, and this has been quite a few thing that the members of the public have been asking on. And as I say, we know we've took a temporary measure, putting a fan in, and hopefully, I think we got the email this morning saying we're going to reopen the main pad on Monday, and we're working on the curling part now. I was just wondering if you could just give us an update on what is happening with that, like.
Thank you, John. Paul?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, John. So the issue with the Ice Bowl has been one around ventilation. And when we set out to achieve a solution to this, what we tried to do was get to a position whereby we met the ventilation requirements, but we didn't affect the ice quality. So in terms of a temporary solution, and in order to meet the COVID guidance regarding ventilation, and that's 8 litres per second per person, we've managed to introduce temporary fans to both the ice hall and the curling area. My understanding is that there is a member, that there's some information coming out to members today to clarify exactly what's happening regarding the reopening. Notwithstanding that, so that's a temporary solution. There's further temporary works required that will hopefully improve ice quality in the ice hall and in the curling area. And I think longer term, we need to look at the ventilation systems in that building, because they're of quite an age. They're not just quite doing what they should be doing. We're managing to ventilate buildings, or there's quite a lot of air leakage that then affects the humidity levels within the building. So I think longer term, we'll need to look at our capital programme to introduce new ventilation systems into.
Thank you, Paul. Ivor?
Chair, thanks for that. Thanks for that update, Paul. As somebody who'd been nipping your ear about getting the curling rink open, I know with a bit of sort of regret that it's going to be another week or so before the curling. Is that because of the works that require to be done, or is it just the ice quality? Because my understanding is players could actually get on because they both meet the ventilation requirements for COVID, and possibly with the players being on, because the number of people in the building will actually affect the ice quality as well. Curling's quite a intricate wee sport. The more folk in there, it causes more issues. Would the testing of the ice over the next, I think it's 5 to 7 days, could that be done with members of clubs in there actually curling?
Thanks, Ivor. Paul?
The simple answer to that question, Ivor, is yes. The ventilation requirements are being met, therefore we're compliant with the COVID guidance. Operationally, it's then for the manager to determine. So what I'm saying is the ventilation's in place, it's compliant. It's then for the manager of the facility to determine just exactly when it opens.
Okay, thank you, Paul.
Right, thanks.
Ronnie?
Thanks. I think that's really good news, Paul. And I think I'd like to thank you as one of the ward members for working towards won't be a temporary solution, because many groups have been in contact with me and individuals, and I'm quite sure they will be really pleased at what's happening there. And we know the longer term, you're looking towards that as well. And, I think in the meantime, as long as people can get on the ice as soon as possible, I think you're doing a good job. Thanks.
Thank you, Ronnie. I quite agree. Go to Ian Carruthers next. Ian?
Thanks, Chair. Paul, I'm just looking at recommendation 2.3, and it talks about the Annan Town Hall and the works required there. It refers to paragraph 3.4.5. There's no figure there, but in the appendix it looks like there's a figure. It looks reasonably substantial as well. I'd say, geez, could we get that confirmed what that figure is? And I wonder what the procurement process was for that, coming to that figure, or was that a different way in which you achieved that? Looks like 312,500 to me, but it's small writing. I'm struggling with it a wee bit. Maybe you could clarify that. Looks like quite a large figure though for the works required, but maybe necessary, and maybe I'm picked that up wrong.
Thanks, Ian. Paul, can you help with that, please?
Yeah, thanks for that, Chair. So in terms of that, that's a pre-tender estimate for work. So we've not yet procured it. So what we're doing is we're going out to tender for that work. Once the tenders are returned and analysed and scrutinised and accepted, obviously that number will be firmed up. But at this stage, it's pre-tender estimate.
Thank you, Paul. Ian, do you want to come back?
Thank you, Paul. No, that's lovely. Thanks. Cheers.
Okay, thanks, members. I think we'll go to the recommendations. So at 2.1, can we note the financial and physical progress of projects within the property, buildings, other assets class capital programme as noted in section 3.1 and reflected in the appendix. 2.2, agree the project variances across the programme as identified in the appendix, and that the carry forward of any slippage to next year will be subject to the approval of the Finance, Procurement and Transformation Committee. I agree the acceleration of the project for Annan Town Hall to upgrade the fire alarm system and replacement of emergency lights as noted in section 3.4.5. agree new projects within the health and safety block at Dumfries Ice Bowl and the programme of works as detailed in section 3.3.5. And note the change in project reporting as noted in sections 3.3.1 to 3.3.3. Thanks very much, members. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Chair.
Item 16 is the ICT Business Systems Asset Class Capital Programme 2020-21 Monitoring Report, report by Head of People and Transformation. This report provides an update on the quarterly monitoring of the ICT asset class as at 30th September 2020. Graham McAlorum is here to assist if members have any questions. Graham, is there anything that you'd like to add to your report, please?
Thank you, Chair. No, this is a routine monitoring report, so I have nothing to add. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Graham. I'll go straight to members' questions then. Stephen Thompson.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and I appreciate this is a routine monitoring report, but it's one that I think on the back of some of the discussions today about working from home and the way that's changed the way we work and the impacts that can have, I'd like to ask if we can maybe consider how we have a BYOD, or bring your own device, policy more flexibly embedded into the way we do business with ICT, because I'm aware that excuse me, working from home can sort of often, if your home is your work and your work is your home, which was a good phrase from earlier, if that becomes the way of things, then often you have to set things up a way that's suitable for you so that you can carry out your work. And I think if there's no flexibility within our current policies, for example, then that can sometimes limit or in fact even encourage members of staff to breach our own security policies by maybe emailing or sending files across devices and out with their own network. So rather than go down that road, could we maybe look at the likes of Aberdeenshire Council or other local authorities or organisations where they have a BYOD policy and it's proportionately done so that we've got that flexibility, because it would be ironic if our most technological department was the least flexible and modern in a sense. So if that's something that we could consider, Chair, I'd welcome that. And if this is the best vehicle to do that, then I'll seek your advice. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Graham, bring your own device.
Thank you, Chair. It is something that we keep under review. We do it regularly. However, at the moment, our infrastructure is such that the security side of things means that BYOD is a potential risk to us. But as I say, it is something that we have under review, and we're certainly looking at taking that forward probably over the next 6 months or so.
Okay, thank you, Graham. Ronnie?
Okay, just on the back of that as well, and you talked about security, Graham. Remember when we came on the council, we were asked if the council could put a separate line into my house. I says, yeah, you can do that. So he did it. He put a separate line in, which doesn't interfere with anything else regarding the household Wi-Fi. And then, for some reason, it then got turned off. It was no longer applicable, and he put a box in, a Cisco, I think it was called. I think Stephen said it was a Cisco box, which then made it secure through the council, as far as I was led to believe. Now, there are other options, obviously, than bring your own, if that's not suitable, as you're saying, for security. There might be other options to look at. And all this is hypothetical, I suppose, because, you know, until people agree to these things, because it is their house, that they will have that in there. And we might end up renting accommodation in everybody's house where they're working from and have health and safety in every now and again to check up on them or whatever. But I don't know. But there are other options. That's what I'm trying to say, rather than bring your own, if that's not a feasible option.
Thanks, Ronnie. Yes, and I guess there certainly are other options, and I should imagine, Graham, this is something that we're looking at in order to support staff who are working from home already, and members too, I guess.
Yes, Chair. the current setup that members have only relies on having an internet connection. So it doesn't necessarily mean to say you have to work from home. If you have a Wi-Fi and an internet connection, then you can connect into the corporate network. So that's making it as flexible as possible. That's obviously using a corporate device. The issue with using your own device is, at the moment, we have no way or no control over the likes of antivirus and so on and so forth. So there still is a substantial risk to the council's information stores should we allow you to come in with your own device that may potentially have a virus risk associated with it.
Okay, thank you, Graham. Malcolm, you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Just on the back of the discussion that we've been having there, I mean, I'll be perfectly honest about the whole thing. The only major issue I have is really with printing, is what I'm particularly talking about. Not that you need to do that often. But another thing that has become apparent as well is when you're even going through all this stuff, and I get my wee red circle on my laptop whirling around and then tells me I'm all nice and secure. It's still quite difficult with some documents to access them if you're not in a council building. And that is quite limiting, especially if you're wanting to work from home. It's important. I mean, in particular, it was I had an issue getting access to old audit reports. I got sent links and they didn't work. And then, lo and behold, they work on some devices and not on others. If you're using iOS, it will work, but it will not necessarily work from the little Dell laptop. So there is a lot of issues needing tidied up to enable people to work from home.
Thanks, Malcolm. Graham, I'm conscious that clearly this is the monitoring report, but obviously, and as is reflected in your report, clearly the response to the pandemic, and that has changed, I guess, how people work. It will have changed the demands on our resources, I suspect, as well. This is probably not the point in time at which we get into this, not the agenda item for getting into this in this sort of detail. But I think that we probably do need to do that at some point. So when does that, or when should that happen? I know, for example, that there was a whole programme to look at members or devices for new elected members when they were elected. So that would be in the run-up to 2017, for example. So, is that being considered? Possibly not driven by elections, but more by the fact that we might continue to have a reasonable contingent of people who work from home. So any advice on that, I guess, would be much appreciated.
Thank you, Chair. The simple answer to that question is yes, we do. We continually review the kit that both staff and members have. And obviously, as you say, the run-up to election, it's an opportunity to renew that. Just by way of reference back to the issues that members are having, it would be helpful for us if those could be reported to our service desk. Then we can take the appropriate opportunity to look at them properly. But as I say, IT kit is always under review. We have moved away from the tablets that members have back to laptops, that they're much more reliable and much more stable. So again, when asset replacement comes around, with the chances are we'll be replacing them with laptops rather than tablets. But the review of kit is something that we do all the time, and as mentioned earlier, particularly now when we have a substantial number of staff working from home, it's not just the kit, but it's also the connectivity that we're reviewing as well.
Thank you, Graham. I think that's helpful. We'll go to the recommendations. Members were asked to note the physical and financial progress of the projects as of 30th September 2020 within the ICT Business System Asset Class Programme, which is currently forecast to utilise the full allocation as reflected in the appendix. Are we content to note that? We are. Thank you, members. Thank you, Graham. So I can advise I have no other business deemed urgent due to the need for a decision. I'll then move to item 18, which is Local Government Scotland Act 1973. and it's to consider the adoption of a resolution to exclude the public from the meeting in terms of section 50A, brackets 4, and paragraphs 6, 8 and 9 of part 1 of Schedule 7A of the Local Government Scotland Act 1973. Do members agree to exclude the public from the meeting to consider this item? If we are agreed, then members, we will need to switch meetings to leave this meeting and join the exempt item meeting, the details of which should be in your inbox, and as Fiona Brown has very helpfully included in the chat.